My name is Kate, and I'm 40 years old. I've been married to my husband, Mason, for 10 years. He's the same age as me, and we used to work together in the same department before moving to different branches. Mason is a responsible man who's well liked by his team. He can be a bit proud and doesn't like showing any weakness. He used to be very confident and masculine, and everyone at work admired him. He was expected to be promoted without any trouble. I'm the opposite, quiet and shy. I was surprised when he showed so much interest in me since we have such different personalities. After dating for 2 years, he proposed to me with a big bouquet of roses. I had never felt so loved by a man, so I immediately said yes and looked forward to starting a great life together. But then, things took a turn. We ended up living with his parents, which I wasn't expecting. I wanted to say no, but Mason insisted, saying his parents were good people and that they were really excited to have me live with them. I couldn't refuse. For the past 10 years, I've lived with his parents, and it's been really tough. Every morning, my mother-in-law would complain, "Kate, you forgot to clean the entrance again," she'd say, even after I'd already made breakfast for everyone. I would apologize, but she'd reply, "Just saying sorry isn't enough, go clean it now." Even though I had to go to work, I was treated like a servant in the mornings. I had to wake up at 5 a.m. to cook breakfast and clean, while my mother-in-law, who didn't work, didn't help at all. I'd rush through everything, go to work, come home, and immediately start making dinner. By the time I went to bed, I was completely exhausted. This daily routine drained me, and I became weak and sick. I think it was all the stress. My mother-in-law would continue to criticize me, saying things like, "Do the cleaning properly so the neighbors don't think we're neglecting it." She'd say this while sitting in the living room, eating the breakfast I made. "If you don't hurry, you'll be late for work," she'd add. Throughout all of this, Mason never defended me. His father would pretend not to notice, hiding behind his newspaper. Living with my in-laws has been terrible. The stress made me lose so much weight that I started to look unhealthy. My period stopped, and I couldn't get pregnant. Despite this, my mother-in-law kept blaming me for everything. Before marriage, I was healthy and cared about my appearance. Now, I looked different, and I didn't even recognize myself. The stress and the shock of my reflection made me feel depressed, and I became completely submissive to my mother-in-law. I lost all motivation to leave the house. Then, I received the news that my father had suddenly passed away in an accident. I hadn't visited my parents in a long time because Mason and his mother would criticize me for wanting to go. I regret not seeing him more before he passed away. My parents' home is about an hour's drive from my in-laws' house, so it's not far. I asked if they would come to my father's funeral, but they refused. When I told them about it, they quickly cut me off, saying, "Just have your family there," without even letting me finish. I was shocked by how cold they were. I simply said, "I understand," though I was angry and sad. At the funeral, many people came because my dad had many connections. They all showed how much he was loved. When I saw my mother, she was shocked by how much weight I had lost. She asked if I was sick, worried that I might be seriously ill. I assured her I was fine, but the stress of everything had taken a toll on me. After calming her down, I decided to tell her the truth about what had been happening at home. I explained how my mother-in-law had been treating me, and how I had been feeling exhausted. I told her it was like being bullied by my in-laws. She gave me a piece of paper, my father's will. It said that I was going to inherit $790,000. The money was mine to decide how to use. I was stunned by the amount but also felt hopeful. With this inheritance, I could finally leave my in-laws' house and build a life for myself away from the stress. When I got back home, I did the usual chores, thinking about the money and my desire to leave. I wanted to talk to Mason about it. That night, when we were alone, I brought up the inheritance. When I told him how much I was inheriting, he was shocked but happy. Then, before I could suggest anything, he said something that shocked me even more. "We need to transfer that money to my mom's bank account." I was confused. Why? I inherited it, so it's mine. He got angry and slammed his hand on the table, saying, "A wife's money belongs to her mother-in-law." I couldn't believe what he was saying. I was scared. The next morning, both Mason and his mom approached me, demanding that I give them the inheritance money. "But it's mine," I protested. They insisted I transfer it to my mother-in-law's account. It felt like they were determined to take it, no matter what. I was so tired of fighting. Then Mason showed me a divorce paper and said, "If you don't change your mind, I'll divorce you." He had already signed the divorce papers. He told me to go back to my parents' house, and if I apologized, he might reconsider. I was stunned, holding the divorce form, realizing that I had never truly been supported in this house. I had been paying my share of living expenses and doing all the housework, yet Mason and his mother always looked down on me. They even tried to take my father's inheritance. I knew that if I stayed, I might give in to their pressure and hand over the money, but this inheritance was my father's gift to me, and I wasn't going to let them take it. With the signed divorce papers in my hand, I realized I now had control over my future. I swore to myself that I wouldn't give up the inheritance and made up my mind to act. After work that day, I went to my mother's house. "Welcome home, sweetie," my mother greeted me with a warm smile. She had made a home-cooked meal, and I was so moved by the taste of her food. It had been so long since I had enjoyed a meal prepared by someone else. As I ate, I cried because it tasted so good. I told my mother about everything that had happened with Mason and his mom. She was shocked, but told me, "The inheritance is yours, and you have the right to decide how to live your life from now on." She comforted me as I cried. After staying with my mom for a week, I decided to go back to my in-laws' house. "Well, I'm going now," I said. "Take care," my mother replied. I was no longer afraid of going back. With a clearer mind, I returned to my in-laws' house. Mason and his mother were waiting for me, arms crossed. "Have you thought about what you did?" they asked. "Yes, I'm sorry. Please let me live here again," I apologized, but it was insincere. My mother-in-law smirked. "Then hurry up and give us the inheritance," she demanded. I lied and told them the inheritance process was taking longer than expected, that it could take up to 6 months or more. They seemed satisfied, thinking I would eventually give them the money. As soon as I returned, they started criticizing me for the house being messy. "You didn't do your duties as a wife. Clean up quickly." The house had only been messy for a week, but it was filthy. It was impressive how dirty it had gotten in such a short time. The old me would have been devastated by the state of the house, but now, I didn't care. I just did what they asked without complaining. 10 months later, it was my mother-in-law's birthday. As usual, she was going on a trip, and of course, they didn't take me with them. "Have you received the inheritance yet?" my mother-in-law asked. "It should arrive today," I lied. "Well, that's perfect. The $790,000 is a gift for my mom. Make sure to transfer it to her account before we return." I knew the inheritance wouldn't arrive so soon, but I didn't say anything. I just smiled and saw them off, saying, "Take care and have a safe trip." Once they were gone, I finally put my plan into motion. I had been waiting for this moment for a long time. They would be shocked when they came back, but it no longer mattered to me. I quickly packed my things and moved out of my in-laws' house. Using my father's inheritance, I built a beautiful new home. I invited my mother to live with me, and we were both so happy to finally be free from the constant stress. That night, we celebrated our new home with a special meal prepared by a chef. The next day, I got a call from my ex-husband. "Hey, what's going on?" he asked, confused because all my things were gone. "I'm not coming back. Goodbye." I tried to hang up, but I could hear my mother-in-law yelling on the other end. "What do you think you're doing? Where are you?" she screamed. "I don't need to answer that. You told me to clean the house, so I packed my things. It's not funny. And by the way, you still haven't transferred the inheritance. How many times do I have to tell you that your money is mine?" she shouted. "I'm single now," I said. When I said that, my mother-in-law went silent. "I'm divorced. I signed the divorce papers Mason gave me. We're strangers now. Goodbye." I hung up, laughing as I felt a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. After that, my ex-husband called many times. When I had the chance, I answered and let him and my mother-in-law yell at me. I recorded those calls to use as evidence of their harassment. I knew it wasn't uncommon for ex-husbands to be abusive, and I planned to report them to the police. The police acted quickly, visiting my ex-in-law's house to issue a warning. It was embarrassing for them, especially since my ex-husband had a high position at work. His colleagues, who didn't like him, spread rumors about him. Eventually, even people from my work heard about it. I told my colleagues, yeah, I'm divorced. The bullying from my mother-in-law and my ex-husband's abuse was too much. I made sure others overheard, and soon, the gossip spread further. My ex-husband's boss heard about it and wasn't happy. "You've got a lot of bad rumors going around," his boss said. "I decided to transfer you." His transfer was to a branch with the worst performance, a remote area with no entertainment or anything fun. It was clear that his career had fallen apart, and there was no chance for promotion anymore. As for my ex-mother-in-law, she was devastated by her son's fall from grace. She became reclusive and eventually developed depression. It seemed she also had dementia and often caused disturbances at home. My ex-father-in-law had to care for her, despite their strained relationship. It felt like justice for everything they had put me through. Now, my mom and I are living happily together. We even started gardening in our spacious yard, something I never would have done if I was still in that house. Gardening has become a new hobby that has brought me joy and health, something I didn't have before due to the stress. I'm so happy to have cut ties with my ex-in-laws and to be living a peaceful, fulfilling life now.
Hi there, my name is Audrey, and today I'm 30 years old. I have a story to share about how I became a millionaire thanks to two greedy people. Let's just say karma always catches up to those who do wrong. I first met my husband Gavin during a work trip organized by our office. We were both heads of different departments in the company, but had never met before. On the trip, there were various activities including games and sports. I got hurt during a volleyball game and sprained my ankle. Gavin quickly helped me and carried me to the infirmary to get first aid. I thought he was very kind and wanted to get to know him better. When we got back from the trip, I reached out to him and asked if he'd like to go out for coffee. He agreed right away, and we set a date to meet at a local cafe. During the date, we talked about the trip, our interests, and our families. I realized that Gavin and I had similar tastes in sports, TV shows, and hobbies. Gavin told me he was very close to his mother, Meg, and visited her at least twice a week. He said, I've always been really close to my mother. We make it a point to see each other at least twice a week. I replied, that's sweet. I'm glad you have a good relationship with her. What about your father? Gavin's face changed and he said, well, he left us a few years ago, and we don't have much contact. I asked, is everything okay between you two? It's complicated, Audrey. Let's just say it didn't work out. What do you mean? He's your father, not your boyfriend. Yeah, but he wasn't very helpful, so my mom and I left. Not helpful how? Financially or emotionally? You know what, we have a lot of other things to talk about. Can we please move on? Oh, of course. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry. I just wanted to get to know you better. We can talk about something else. I didn't think much about it and figured it was just a sensitive topic for Gavin. I was sure he'd open up more as we got closer. After that day, we met up a few more times over the next few weeks, and even at work, I started having lunch with him daily. In a few months, we became very close and things got serious. I knew his birthday was coming up, so I decided to plan a surprise party for him. I got our friends to help with the planning and guest list. Since I knew how close Gavin was to Meg, I thought it made sense to invite her to the party too. I wasn't sure about inviting his father, so I decided not to, as I didn't want anything to ruin Gavin's birthday. The day of the party arrived, and I finished decorating and setting up Gavin's apartment, then got the cake and food ready. Guests started arriving, and everyone was excited for Gavin to come. Just before Gavin was supposed to arrive, a middle-aged woman walked to the door. She was dressed in a fancy green evening gown and had a branded handbag. I walked over to her and introduced myself. Hello, I'm Audrey. You must be one of Gavin's close relatives. It's nice to meet you. How do you know Gavin? Oh, finally someone with some manners. I'm Meg, Gavin's mother, and yes, I'm the most important guest here. He's my son, Of course, Meg. I didn't mean to offend you. Gavin talks so fondly about you. Please come in and make yourself comfortable. Well, I should hope so. I practically raised him all by myself. I hope you've done a decent job planning this party. I've put in a lot of effort, and our friends have been a great help too. I hope you enjoy it. We'll see about that. Just make sure you don't get in the way of my time with Gavin. He's my boy after all. Of course, I wouldn't want to come between you two. Gavin cherishes his relationship with you, and I respect that. However, Meg didn't seem impressed by anything I did. She loudly criticized the decorations and even started insulting the other guests at the party. I didn't react to any of Meg's actions and kept being polite, hoping she would eventually like me. Soon, I heard Gavin's car approaching, so I went outside to greet him. The surprise party went well, and Gavin was thrilled with the effort I had put in. We cut the cake and gave him our presents. Meg insisted on being next to Gavin in all the pictures, even the ones with just him and me. She also claimed her gift was the best, and Gavin would love it the most. To my surprise, Gavin didn't stop Meg from making a fuss. Instead, he catered to all her demands, making sure she was always by his side. When it was time for dinner, everyone took their seats at the table. Gavin stood up to make a toast, thanking everyone for coming to his birthday party. He said he had a very important announcement to make and was glad everyone was there to hear it. Before I could react, he got down on one knee, pulled out a ring, and asked me to marry him. I was overjoyed and cried happy tears before excitedly saying yes. Everyone cheered and congratulated us, but I noticed Meg got up and left the table. Confused, I pointed it out to Gavin. "Babe, your mom left the table. Is everything okay? We should find her and get her blessing. She'll be upset if we don't." Gavin replied, "But why do we need her blessing? This is our decision, isn't it?" "Babe, you know I always talk to my mom about important decisions. We're really close and I value her opinion. I get that she's important to you, but isn't this about us? Shouldn't we make decisions together?" "Of course we do, but I can't ignore her. She means a lot to me. Can we just find her and talk to her about giving us her blessing?" I started to feel concerned. No one should be that dependent on their parents, but I let it go because I loved him and wanted his mother to approve of me too. We searched for Meg all over the house but couldn't find her. Eventually, we saw her sitting quietly in the backyard. We approached her and asked for her blessing, which she reluctantly gave after Gavin asked. Gavin apologized, saying, "Mom, I'm sorry I didn't talk to you before proposing to Audrey. It just happened in the moment and I thought it was the perfect time." Meg responded, "Well, Gavin, you usually discuss big decisions with me. I felt left out this time." "I know, and I didn't mean to upset you. I planned to talk to you the next day, but the surprise party changed everything. I understand it was unexpected, but you should have found a way to talk to me before making such a big decision. You're right, Mom. I should have. I got caught up in the excitement, and Audrey has been so amazing and supportive. I wanted to show her how much she means to me. I can see you really love her, Gavin. I just want you to remember to include me in your life, especially with important matters. I promise, Mom, I'll work on communicating better with you. You're an important part of my life, and I want you to be part of Audrey's and my journey together. That's all I ask, dear." I decided not to listen to the rest of their conversation because I started feeling like I was eavesdropping, even though I wasn't. As I walked away, I heard Meg telling Gavin that I wasn't good enough for him, that he should reconsider marrying me, and that I wasn't beautiful enough and was only interested in Gavin for his money. I ignored Meg's taunts and pretended I didn't hear them. Over the next few weeks, we started planning our wedding. Meg didn't help with any of the preparations. She tried to dictate which dress I should wear and threw a tantrum when I told her I wanted to choose my own. She also met with me a few times to tell me that I should pay more than half of the wedding expenses, saying I was lucky to be marrying Gavin and needed to contribute. I didn't take these incidents to heart, thinking she would warm up to me once we were married. Finally, after weeks of planning, my wedding day arrived. I was in my dressing room, surrounded by my bridesmaids and my mother, getting ready. Everyone told me how beautiful I looked in my flowing white dress. Then I heard a knock at the door and saw Meg walk in. To my shock, she was wearing a white wedding dress. "Why are you wearing a wedding dress?" I asked. "Today is my son's wedding day, and it's more important to me than anything else," Meg replied. "I chose to wear this dress to highlight my significance as the mother of the groom." "I understand it's an important day for you, but isn't it customary for the bride to wear white? It might take away from Audrey's moment," my mother pointed out. "Well, that's not my concern," Meg said. "Gavin is my only son, and I deserve attention on this occasion too." "Of course, Meg," my mother said, But today is primarily about Audrey and Gavin's love and commitment. It's their special day. I know that, but I'm just making a statement. My presence here matters as much as anyone else's, Meg insisted. I was furious but decided not to cause a scene and ruin the day. The rest of the ceremony went well. We exchanged vows and rings, and it was emotional for both of us since we had been waiting for this day for a long time. During the wedding planning, I had asked Gavin to handle the guest list. I noticed he hadn't included his father and asked if he was sure about that decision. Gavin said his father had abandoned them and had no place at such an important celebration. I wanted to change his mind but decided to drop the subject, not wanting to upset him. The months after our wedding were blissful. We spent every moment together and started planning to buy our own house. Gavin and I had always wanted to live together, but decided to get married first before making such a decision. We began house hunting, spending a few hours every day looking for our dream home. One day, Gavin called me at work. "Hey babe, I'm sorry, but an important meeting has come up. I won't be able to go house hunting with you today." "No worries, darling, it happens. Don't stress about it. I can handle it on my own." "Oh, thanks for understanding. I'll make it up to you, I promise. You better. Just focus on your meeting and we'll catch up later. Love you." "Love you too, babe." After work, I got into my car and drove to the location of the property. I saw that the house was on the 10th floor of a building still under construction. When I arrived, I met with the realtor, who informed me that another guest had arrived under our name to look at the property. Knowing Gavin was busy, I was confused about who this person could be. To my shock, I saw my mother-in-law, Meg, waiting impatiently at the door. I asked her why she had come to see the property. She said she wanted to make sure the house was good enough for her son and that it had a place for her to stay when she visits. I didn't want Meg involved, but I let her join me to avoid making Gavin angry. We began the tour and Meg didn't stop criticizing the building and saying the house wasn't up to her standards. By the end of the tour, I was very frustrated and wanted to leave as quickly as possible. The realtor stepped away to take a call and told us he'd show us the rest of the property when he returned. He also warned us to be careful, as the house was still under construction and could be dangerous. I started walking around and noticed an unfinished staircase outside the house. Suddenly, I felt someone kick my right leg. I lost my balance and fell down the stairs. I couldn't move and felt bruises on my arms and head. I looked up to see Meg smiling in victory before she quickly turned and left. I was in shock, unable to understand what had just happened, and I couldn't move for a few minutes. Eventually, I found my phone in my pocket and called an ambulance. As I was taken to the hospital, I couldn't stop thinking about how Meg had tried to push me down the stairs to injure me. I had been nothing but kind to her, and her behavior left me both sad and angry. At the hospital, I underwent first aid and several scans. I tried calling Gavin multiple times, but he didn't pick up. The medication made me drowsy, and I eventually fell asleep. The next morning, I tried calling him again. This time he answered, but his reaction was far from what I expected. Instead of concern, he sounded angry and accused me of lying. "I can't believe you're lying about this, Audrey," Gavin snapped. "You expect me to believe my own mother pushed you down the stairs?" "Gavin, I'm not lying. Meg kicked me and I fell. She deliberately hurt me," I pleaded. "You're just trying to cover up your actions. My mother said you were being aggressive. She would never hurt you for no reason," he retorted. "I can't believe you're taking her word over mine. She's been manipulating you, Gavin," I cried. "Stop it. She would never lie to me. She's my mother. I thought you loved me and trusted me. But now I need to be with her. She's in shock because of what you did," he said coldly. "You're choosing her over me, Gavin? After everything we've been through?" I asked, heartbroken. "You brought this on yourself, Audrey. Maybe you deserve this for what you did," he replied. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I began to cry and ended the call, overwhelmed with grief and disbelief. For the next 2 days, I was in shock. My injuries started to heal, and my parents visited, shocked at Gavin's reaction. My father suggested I look into Gavin's father, suspecting there was more to the story. Taking his advice, I hired a private investigator and contacted Gavin's father, Neil. At first, Neil was confused about who I was, but he soon understood the situation. I divorced Meg and left because she and Gavin were using me for my money. Gavin tried to steal from me by transferring my company into his name, Neil revealed. Oh my goodness, I had no idea. That's terrible, I exclaimed. Yes, it was a tough decision, but I couldn't let them take advantage of me any longer. I want you to know that they're never up to any good, Neil warned. Thank you, Neil. I believe you and I appreciate your help, I said. I'm glad you do. I have a plan to handle this situation. I need you to get Gavin and Meg to visit you at the hospital tomorrow morning, Neil explained. Why do you want them to come here? I asked, feeling uneasy. I need to confront them about their actions and protect you from further harm. It's time they face the consequences, Neil said firmly. Despite my fear and reluctance to see either Meg or Gavin, I knew I had to trust Neil if I wanted justice. I called Gavin and told him I had a special gift for him and Meg to apologize. I mentioned it was expensive and that I wanted to make sure they received it. Hearing the word expensive, Gavin and Meg readily agreed to visit the hospital. The next morning, Neil arrived at the hospital with flowers. I thanked him for his help. Just as we finished our conversation, Gavin and Meg walked in. They froze in shock, staring at Neil. Neil, what's this about? Why are you here? Gavin demanded. I couldn't stand by and watch you and Meg manipulate Audrey any longer, Neil replied. Manipulate? We didn't do anything wrong. She's the one causing trouble, Meg protested. That's not true. Audrey has been through a lot because of both of you. It's time to end this charade, Neil said. Dad, you're ruining everything. Audrey and I love each other, Gavin argued. I divorced your mother because of your actions, Gavin. You tried to take advantage of me and my company. I won't let Audrey face the same thing. These are divorce papers, Gavin, so Audrey can finally be free from your toxic influence, Neil announced. Meg snatched the papers from Gavin and screamed when she saw the $40 million inheritance that was supposed to go to Gavin would now go to me. Both Meg and Gavin's jaws dropped, and they began arguing with Neil before resorting to begging him to change his mind. Neil stood firm, telling them they deserved this for trying to hurt someone innocent like me. He then called hospital security to remove them from the room, and they were dragged out. I had gone through hell, but finally I got my revenge. Afterward, I maintained a good friendship with Neil, grateful for his help in ending the nightmare. Hi, my name is Alex, and I'm a 30-year-old woman who's been through a lot recently. Even though some time has passed, it still feels like everything happened just yesterday. I wanted to talk about it with someone other than my family and friends, so here I am. Let me start from the beginning. I was born much later than my sister. She was 16 years old when I was born. Because of the big age gap, we never had a close sisterly bond, although she did spoil me a lot. It felt like she treated me more like her own child than her sister. By the time I was old enough to remember anything, my sister was already off to college. When I was 10 years old, I attended her wedding. She was already pregnant at the time, so I was excited not just for the wedding, but also to meet my niece and have another kid to play with. 5 months after the wedding, my niece Tori was born. I still clearly remember visiting her in the hospital right after she was born. I was so excited to see her little face and felt an overwhelming amount of love for her. After Tori came home, I spent as much time as possible with my sister to help take care of her. As the years went by, my love for Tori only grew. I would always offer to babysit whenever my sister needed help. Instead of thinking of each other as aunt and niece, Tori and I felt more like siblings. That's why it was so hard for both of us when I had to move to a different state, Florida, to study and work. But I made sure to always call home and stay in touch with my family, especially Tori. The distance didn't break our bond. In my last year of university, I met my husband, Caleb. He was the star football player, and I still don't know how I caught his attention since I wasn't into sports at all. I spent most of my time reading in the library, but one day Caleb found me there and started talking to me. What I loved most about him was how confident and charming he was. Later, after we were together for a while, he told me he was actually nervous to talk to me, but I never would have guessed that from how confidently he approached me. We went on several dates and quickly realized that even though we had different interests, we fit well together. We shared the same sense of humor and spent all our dates laughing until our bellies hurt. It didn't take long for us to make our relationship official. I always made it clear to Caleb how much I loved my family, so we met them through many video calls. The only person I didn't tell about Caleb was my niece Tori. Even though Caleb had met almost everyone important in my family, he hadn't met Tori yet. I did talk to him about her a lot though. One day, Caleb asked why he hadn't met my niece, even though I talked about her so much. I told him, "Babe, I haven't introduced you to Tori because she's just 11. I want to protect her innocence from my adult life." He replied, "I don't think 11 is too young. I'd like to meet her and be part of her life too. Tori is the most important person to me, but she's still a child. She doesn't need to be involved in my romantic life," I explained. "It feels like you're keeping me separate because you doubt our relationship's future," he said. "What? That's not true at all," I assured him. "You're afraid of introducing me to Tori in case things don't work out between us. You don't want to introduce her to someone who won't be a constant in her life," he continued. "You've got it all wrong. It's about protecting her, not doubting us," I said. "All right, fine, let's drop it. Just understand that I see a long future for us, but I'm just not ready to mix our worlds yet," I explained. I understood why Caleb was upset, but I wasn't ready to involve Tori in this part of my life yet. I wanted to protect Tori's innocence, even though deep down I knew I wasn't really doing that. In my mind, she was still that little baby I first met in the hospital, and I wanted to keep seeing her that way at least until she became a teenager. 2 years after we graduated from college, Caleb asked me to move in with him, and I happily agreed. I was thrilled to live with the man I was so deeply in love with. During this time, I also met all of Caleb's family. Caleb was still a little hurt that I hadn't told Tori about him yet, but he chose to let it go instead of bringing it up. I could tell he was still bothered by it because he would briefly mention it before dropping the subject. When Tori turned 13, I waited a couple of months before finally telling her about Caleb. We got on a video call one day while Caleb was out for a run. "Tori, I have something to share with you," I said. "What's up?" she replied. "I have a boyfriend." "Really? Oh my gosh, tell me everything," she exclaimed. "His name is Caleb. We met in college and have been together since my senior year. Is he a good guy?" she asked. "He's the best. You'll love him," I assured her. "I can't wait to meet him then." "Well, actually, we were planning to come for Thanksgiving." "Wait, seriously? I've got bad timing, huh?" "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "I got into that boarding high school I've been raving about for ages. I need to be there next month." "That's amazing, Tori. I'm so proud of you." "Yeah, but I won't be around for Thanksgiving." "Don't worry about it. I'm planning on marrying Caleb anyway, so you'll have plenty of time to meet him." "You're already planning weddings, huh? I love it," she said with a laugh. We spent the next half hour excitedly talking about Tori's new school. I learned that Tori would only have some time off, but now that Caleb and I were working, we couldn't just take off to go meet her. And when Tori was at school, she wasn't allowed to use electronics for long periods. Tori was fine with that because the school had so many extracurricular activities that would keep her busy and tire her out by the end of the day. I was excited for her to experience new things. When Caleb came back from his run, I told him about the call. Once again, he was disappointed that he missed meeting Tori, but he felt better knowing that I was ready to introduce him. He didn't mind waiting because he knew I wasn't purposely keeping him away from the most important person in my life. A couple of months later, while we were visiting my family for Thanksgiving, Caleb decided to propose to me. I couldn't have imagined a better time for him to do it. He knew how much I wanted my family to be there during my big moments. I said yes with the biggest smile on my face and tears streaming down my cheeks. We got married within the next year. Tori, of course, heard the news and sent a text congratulating me. Caleb and I spent the next year meticulously planning our wedding. We wanted everything to be perfect. Since Tori was still at school, there was no way for her to attend the wedding. I was crushed that she couldn't make it, but I knew her education was more important than an event like a wedding. Plus, Caleb comforted me by saying we could have a small ceremony after Tori graduates to replicate our wedding. The wedding was a grand affair. Everyone laughed and cried, and I felt like the luckiest girl alive. The love and support I received that day were beyond anything I could have imagined. I truly believed that the rest of my life would be blissful because I'd get to spend it with Caleb. And for the first year of our marriage, that was true. But then things started to go downhill. We both had stable 9-to-5 jobs, made good money, and lived comfortably. We were never really interested in having children, so that wasn't something we had to plan for. So it came as a surprise when one night while we were lying in bed, Caleb asked if he could start working overtime. "Babe, there's something I need to talk to you about," he said. "What's up?" I asked, a little concerned. "I've been thinking about taking up overtime at work," Caleb said one night as we lay in bed. "Overtime? Why the sudden interest?" I asked, surprised. "I've been aiming for a promotion for a while now, and the extra money could help us," he explained. "I love that you're passionate and ambitious, but we're already comfortable," I said. "I know, but I think we can do even better," he replied. "I love our time together, just relaxing after work and on weekends. It means a lot to me," I told him, hoping he'd understand. "I value that too, but I see the potential for more," he said. "It's not about potential, it's about quality of life. I want to enhance our quality of life through hard work," he insisted. "I respect your choices, but I'm not happy with this decision," I admitted. "I'm doing what's best for both of us," Caleb said, then turned over and turned out the light after wishing me good night. I was left awake with my thoughts, feeling upset that Caleb had made this decision without really discussing it with me. We didn't need the extra money. Both of us were able to save a good amount each month. We had made smart investments and had our retirement funds set up. We lived comfortably, so I didn't understand why he felt the need to work more. But I figured that if Caleb was happy, I would be happy too. The next few months were torture for me. Caleb started coming home late and was usually too tired to do anything. He'd eat dinner and go straight to bed. He even worked on Saturdays and spent Sundays sleeping. I barely saw him properly most days, and I missed spending time with my husband. I tried talking to him about cutting back on work, but he always brushed me off, saying it was for our benefit. Eventually, after 6 months of this, Caleb did get promoted. I thought this would mean he'd have more flexibility with his time. While he did get more flexibility, it came with constant business trips. Every other week, he was flying out of state. It got to the point where it felt like I wasn't living with my husband anymore, just a roommate I barely knew. I didn't know what to do. One month, Caleb hadn't been home for more than 2 days, and that was my tipping point. I broke down in front of him, asking why he never spent time with me anymore. "Seriously, Alex? You're being so dramatic," he said, annoyed. "I'm not being dramatic, I'm just expressing my feelings," I said, hurt. "Well, you're being selfish." "I'm working hard for a better life for us," he shot back. "I never asked for any of that. All I want is time with you, the simple things we used to do," I pleaded. "Right, because sitting on the couch watching junk TV is so fulfilling. Stop being ungrateful," he snapped. "You're calling me ungrateful? I appreciate your hard work, but it's tearing us apart," I said, my voice shaking. "If I waited for you to tell me what to do, I'd be stuck doing nothing in life," he retorted. "Do you really think I'm holding you back?" I asked, shocked. "You settle for less, you're happy with the bare minimum." "I'm not like that. I want more from life," he said, his frustration clear. "I'm not settling. I'm content with what we have because it's enough for me," I tried to explain. "And that's your problem. You're too lazy to chase after better things," he said harshly. "I'm not greedy, Caleb. I value what's important over constantly working myself to the bone," I replied, tears filling my eyes. "You just don't get it, do you?" he said, storming out of the house, leaving me standing there, overwhelmed by a flood of emotions. How could Caleb treat me this way? How could he look at me with such disappointment when he used to see me as the light of his life? I let it be for a while, trying to process everything. Eventually, Caleb's business trips became so frequent that he barely lived with me anymore. My hurt numbed me entirely. I stopped talking to everyone as I sank deeper into depression. What pulled me out of my depression was a call from an unknown number. At first, I ignored the calls, but they were so persistent that I finally answered. I cautiously said, "Hello." "Hello, Alex, it's me, Tori," the voice on the other end said. "Tori? Oh my goodness, it's really you. How have you been? How come the new number?" I asked, surprised but thrilled. "I know, it's been too long. I lost my phone and had to get a new one. Plus, it helped that I lost it right around the time I graduated high school. I'm so sorry I haven't kept in touch. Life got busy, and I let time slip away, she explained. Don't worry, I've been swamped too. Even keeping up with my own mom was tough. So, how come the sudden call? I asked, curious. I picked a university in Florida, Alex. I'm actually in Florida now, she said. No way, that's amazing. I'm so happy you're close by. We have to meet, I said excitedly. I was hoping you'd say that. I've missed you so much. Can we really meet up? She asked. Of course. Let's make plans. I can't wait to see you again, I replied, smiling. Me too. It's going to be awesome catching up, she said. We set a date for that weekend. I thought it was the perfect time because Caleb would be home that weekend, and I was eager to see Tori again after all this time. I realized that Tori's university was only an hour's drive from where I lived, so we could meet up more often. That night, I called Caleb to share the news, but he didn't seem to care. I got upset and asked, "Why aren't you excited about meeting Tori? After all this time, I've realized I'm never really a priority for you. You kept me hidden from someone so important to you with some silly excuse." Caleb responded, "That's not true. I don't think my feelings about this are silly. Can't we just forget about it for now? I still want you both to meet." "It doesn't matter now," I said, "but could you at least be nice when Tori's here? I don't want her to see our problems." "Oh, so now you care about appearances. When will you be honest with her?" Caleb shot back. "It's not about that. I just want her to see the good parts of us." "Good parts, huh? Doesn't seem like there's much of that left these days," Caleb said, walking away. I couldn't understand why Caleb was being so difficult. I wasn't asking for anything unreasonable. I would have said the same thing if any other family member was visiting. I decided not to think about it too much because it only made me feel worse. When the weekend arrived, I greeted Tori with a big hug and teared up seeing how much she'd grown. We had 2 hours alone before Caleb came back from his trip, and during that time, we caught up on everything we'd missed. We laughed and cried together as we remembered the past. When Caleb finally came home, he went to freshen up in the bedroom. When he came back to the living room, he kissed me and then introduced himself to Tori. Tori looked confused as she shook his hand. "How have you been, Tori?" Caleb asked. "I've been all right," Tori replied. "Well, that's good to hear. I've always wanted to meet you. Alex talks about you all the time, but she never let me meet you before." "Yeah, I've been meaning to see you too. I'm glad we finally got the chance." "What university are you attending?" Caleb asked. "I'm going to New College of Florida." "Oh really? Sorry, but you look familiar." "I can't figure out where I might have seen you before," Caleb said. Tori hesitated. "I'm not sure. You just look familiar." I noticed Caleb looked panicked. He was sweating and trembling. I asked him if everything was okay, but before he could answer, Tori gasped and pulled out her phone. I looked at both of them, confused, wondering what was going on. I asked Tori and Caleb to explain what was happening. Caleb didn't say anything and tried to leave, but Tori stopped him, saying he wasn't going anywhere. I looked at Tori, confused, as she showed me her phone and asked me to look at the photos on it. In the photos, I saw text messages between two people who seemed like a couple. I was puzzled and asked Tori what this was about. Tori explained that she had made a friend at university. When they went to a party, her friend mentioned she was dating an older man named Caleb. Tori showed me several pictures of this man, and I realized that it was Caleb. I asked Caleb if this was true. He tried to deny it and said, "Are you really going to believe a young girl over your husband? You're just avoiding the truth." Tori responded, "There's proof from texts with my friend, but the messages only have a contact name, not a number, so it's hard to confirm it's him." She then showed me more pictures of Caleb on dates with her friend. My heart broke with each photo. I couldn't understand why Caleb would do this. We had been going through a rough patch, but I had hoped we could work things out. I turned to Caleb with tears in my eyes and asked him how long he had been having the affair. Caleb looked away and didn't answer. Tori, clearly disgusted, said she knew it had been going on for 2 years. My heart shattered. I wondered if Caleb's long work hours were really just an excuse to be with someone else. Then another thought struck me and I felt sick just thinking about it, but I had to ask for my own peace of mind. I asked Tori how old her friend was. Tori replied with disgust that her friend was the same age as her. I couldn't bear to look at Caleb anymore. Not only had he been cheating, but he had been doing it with someone so young. I packed up Caleb's things and threw them at him, telling him to leave. He didn't even try to argue. Once he was gone, I ran to the bathroom and threw up, overwhelmed by the disgust of his actions. I cried for a long time, and Tori stayed by my side, comforting me. She spent the week with me as I took the necessary steps to move forward. I quickly filed for divorce and found a lawyer to report Caleb for his crime of dating and sleeping with a minor. Caleb tried to fight back, but the court sided with me. I got most of our assets, and Caleb was found guilty. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to pay a $110,000 fine. I felt a sense of justice and relief. After all the pain I had endured, it was finally over. I was deeply disgusted to have been with a man capable of such terrible actions, but I was glad he was held accountable. I found some comfort knowing that Caleb would always be a registered sex offender and that his life would be greatly affected by his actions. It took me another 2 years to fully heal, but I grew stronger from the experience. I moved back to my home state and spent time recovering with my close friends and family. In the end, it was my family who supported me and helped me find joy again. I share my story to remind you that no matter how difficult things get, there is always hope. I'm still healing, but I'm no longer haunted by Caleb's betrayal. Thank you for listening.
Hello everyone, my name is Taylor. I am a single mother who faced many challenges to raise my son, Eric. Many single mothers have supportive families. I thought I did too, but I was wrong and found out in the worst way. Thankfully, I managed to protect myself and my son from the people who tried to ruin our lives. My ex-husband Carl is an abusive person. Just thinking about him makes me feel sick. There was a time when I was deeply in love with him. But things got bad after we got married. Carl was a wonderful boyfriend, but as a husband, he was a nightmare. He was controlling and gradually became abusive. I stayed in the marriage for over 8 years because he manipulated me and trapped me with a baby. I believed my son deserved a father, so I didn't leave. However, things got much worse when Eric was 5. One day, Carl started to hit me very hard. My poor son saw this and tried to stop his dad. Carl was so angry that he pushed Eric to the floor. That was the breaking point for me. I called Child Protective Services, CPS, and the police, which was enough to keep Carl away from us. However, he was determined to get back at me. He said, "You think you can run away from me, Taylor? That will never happen. Sooner or later, I will have you and my son back in my house. You just wait and see. We are getting a divorce, Carl. There is no way I will allow you near me or my son again. Even if we divorce, I'll find a way to take Eric. I am his dad, and I have rights. He will be in my home, and so will you. Mark my words." Carl's behavior and violent history made me very paranoid. My son was extremely traumatized and had to go to therapy to deal with his issues. After a long court battle, Carl and I were finally divorced. I didn't stop there. I moved near my parents and sister to stay safe from Carl. I even got restraining orders against him. It was the most horrific time of my life. Carl never knew where I had moved. He might have guessed, but he didn't have my exact address. Being near my parents and sister made me feel safe. However, my parents were not very supportive of my divorce. They said, "Was it really necessary to get a divorce? You two could have attended therapy and talked it out. It's not a big deal. Poor little Eric had to lose his dad over your problems. That's so unfair. He must be devastated not being able to see his dad. Are you serious right now? Carl used to beat me up, Mom, and he even hit Eric when my son tried to protect me. How can you not see what a monster Carl is? Mom, Dad, you need to be more understanding of Taylor. She has been through a lot. You have no right to make her feel guilty. She did the right thing," my sister said. At first, Mom and Dad would talk to me about letting Eric see his dad, but I never allowed it. My parents were never happy with my decision. They'd always said, "Why don't you let Carl visit Eric? He must miss his son." How would you feel if I wasn't around when you were growing up? I know I would have been devastated. Taylor, you grew up in a home with 2 parents. You can't be so selfish with Eric. He deserves the love of his father. Soon he will start resenting you for not allowing his father to be in his life. What are you even talking about? Eric is terrified of his dad. He begs me never to let Carl near us again. Neither of us wants anything to do with him. You may be letting Carl's bad actions color your view. You shouldn't have involved Eric in your problems. He's scared of Carl because you've made him that way. That's unfair, Dad. If Carl was a good man and a loving father, he wouldn't have hurt me in front of Eric, or at all. No matter how hard I tried, they never agreed with my decision. Over time, though, they seemed to accept it. They became close to Eric and did a great job as grandparents. Eric also formed strong bonds with them and his aunt, Blair. I think part of the reason my parents stopped pressuring me was because Blair and I were financially supporting them. Dad doesn't have a good job and Mom doesn't work, so we sent them monthly allowances. Money might have been why they eventually stopped bringing up the matter. Eric and I were doing well in our new home. He started school locally, and I had a good job in an office. Things were going smoothly, and I was happy being close to family. However, I didn't expect my loved ones to betray me. About a year after leaving Carl, I was preparing for a business trip to another city. I couldn't bring Eric along because there were no childcare arrangements at work. I was stuck, wondering what to do with Eric. That's when my mom and dad suggested a plan. They said, "We heard you'll be going on a business trip soon. Stuart and I have been thinking about babysitting Eric for you. We can stay at your house and take care of both Eric and the house." "Are you sure about this? Eric can be quite a handful. Plus, leaving your apartment empty might be risky, don't you think? It's just for a few days, so I don't think it'll be a problem. Besides, we love Eric and he loves us. I'm sure he'll enjoy spending time with us." "Yeah, we'll stay here and take care of everything. Your house will be safe while you're away. It's like getting two benefits at once." "Okay, since you're so insistent, I'll leave Eric and my house with you." I agreed to let them babysit Eric and stay at my house until I returned. I felt satisfied with the plan because I trusted my parents completely. Now I know I made a huge mistake. I shouldn't have trusted them at all. My business trip was just a week later. I flew out that night after saying goodnight to Eric. I had to leave a day early to prepare for a big client meeting the next morning. I called my parents and Eric from the hotel after I arrived. Everything seemed fine. Little did I know what was about to happen. At night, while I was in my hotel room preparing for my meeting the next day, Blair called me. Her call made me anxious. I immediately thought something might be wrong at home. I answered nervously. "Hey Taylor, have you already left for your business trip?" Blair asked. "Yes, I flew out yesterday. It's a short trip." "Have you left Eric with Mom and Dad?" I replied. "Yes. Is everything okay?" "They're staying at your house with Eric. They're taking good care of him, and he loves being with them," Blair said. "Taylor, I don't know how to tell you this, but I think you made a mistake leaving Eric with them. I don't think they have good intentions. Something doesn't feel right," Blair continued hesitantly. "What do you mean? Tell me what's going on. You're scaring me, Blair," I urged, feeling a knot in my stomach. "I think Mom and Dad might try to take Eric to see Carl. They've been against your decisions about the restraining orders and your divorce. I have a bad feeling they might try to reunite Eric with him," Blair explained. "What? No, they can't do that. There must be some misunderstanding. They didn't approve of my divorce, but they wouldn't side with someone who abused me," I protested in disbelief. "I understand you trust them, but please stay cautious. If you need anything, I'm here for you. Remember that," Blair urged. "Thanks, Blair. I'll keep that in mind." "Don't worry," I replied. Blair's words lingered in my mind, unsettling me deeply. I couldn't shake off the unease, so I decided to call my parents and check in with them. I said, "Hey, Mom, can you pass the phone to Eric? I miss him a lot and want to talk." "Sure, Taylor. Just a moment," Mom replied. "Mom, are you there?" "Hi, Eric. I just wanted to check in. Is everything okay? Are you having fun?" I asked. "Mom, I need to tell you something. Grandma and Grandpa have called the Dad." "Oh no, my phone's about to die. I'm so sorry, Taylor. I have to charge it now. Why don't you call back later? Eric's fine and playing with us. Don't worry about a thing. Take care. Bye." Something about Eric's attempt to speak and how Mom quickly ended the call made me suspicious. My mind raced, so I decided to review the security camera footage. I didn't have cameras inside, but I did outside. To my shock, there was my ex-husband's car in the driveway. I watched the footage and saw my mom opening the door for him. After watching the footage, I was furious and scared for Eric's safety and my own. Carl wasn't supposed to know where we lived. I had a restraining order against him. He should never have been near my son. I immediately called my parents in anger, recording the call. "Mom, why is Carl at my house? What's going on? Who gave you permission to let him in?" "Taylor, you need to calm down. Carl isn't here." "Why would you think that?" My mom replied defensively. "Mom, I can see his car parked in my driveway. Did you forget I have security cameras outside? I saw you open the door for him," I insisted. There was a long silence on their end. Neither of them said a word. I could sense I had caught them off guard, but what happened next shocked me even more. Look, I understand you're upset with Carl and us, but you're being unreasonable. You need to give us some understanding. I'm very disappointed in you, Taylor. You can't keep a son away from his father. Eric needs Carl in his life. You're not being a good mother. Please tell me you're joking. Carl physically abused me. He even hurt Eric when he tried to protect me. How can you allow Carl back into his life? I have a restraining order against him, for God's sake. That was in the past, Taylor. People can change. Your restraining order was causing issues. So yes, your mom and I decided to step in. We gave Carl your address since you wouldn't. We've reunited father and son. They're happy together. Mom, Dad, you have 5 minutes to get Carl out of there. If you don't, there will be consequences. Don't threaten us, Taylor. We're your parents. You're 3,000 miles away. Carl will stay here as long as he wants. We're planning a picnic tomorrow. I'm hanging up now before you say anything else, Mom retorted before ending the call. I literally gave you 5 minutes to get Carl out. When that time passed and his car was still in the driveway, I had enough. I felt scared and betrayed. I knew I had to act fast, so I called law enforcement. I explained everything and told them to arrest Carl. I also instructed them to take Eric from my parents and give him to Blair. The police arrived quickly, thanks to living near a station. I watched through CCTV as they confronted my parents and Carl. Mom and Dad looked panicked as the police moved in to arrest Carl. Mom called me, furious. Taylor, what's wrong with you? Did you call the cops on us? How could you do this? Carl could go to jail. He will go to jail, Mom, and so will you if you don't leave my house right now. I don't want you and Dad on my property again. I've called Blair, she's coming to take Eric. You'll never come near us again. How dare you, Taylor? You're a horrible woman. I wish you were never born. You can't kick us out and take our grandchild from us. We won't let that happen. Good luck with that, Mom and Dad. The police will stop you if you try anything. They know Eric is going with Blair. You can't do this. We have grandparent rights. We'll sue you. Good luck trying to fight me in court. It'll be interesting to see the judge's reaction when she learns you allowed an abusive man into my home despite a restraining order. You won't stand a chance. Before my parents could respond, the police emerged with handcuffs. Carl was led to a waiting police car and placed in the back seat. Seeing him taken away brought me a sense of relief and satisfaction. The police then turned their attention to my parents, who were flustered, and my dad began shouting at them, likely arguing about Eric. At that moment, my sister Blair arrived. She showed her ID to the police and took Eric with her. My parents tried to intervene, but the police intervened and prevented them from causing any trouble. The officers stayed until my parents gathered their belongings and left. Blair locked up the house and took the keys from them. My parents tried calling me to scream about the situation, but I didn't pick up. They started sending me strange and threatening texts, which I recorded because they were alarming. Here's what they said. What you did today wasn't right, Taylor. There will be consequences. You had no right to take Eric away from us and Carl. I can't believe you're my daughter. I hate you. You won't keep us away, Taylor. You work. You can't be with Eric all the time. We'll get visitation rights from court, then take Eric from you. One call to CPS from us and Eric could be taken away. We're smarter than you. We'll call CPS with bad stuff. They'll place Eric with us, and he'll never return to you. That won't happen. Eric stays with me, and I'll protect him with everything I have. We know Eric's school and your address. We'll find a way to be with him. You can't stop us. Yeah, if you act crazy, we'll take him away from you. You'll never see him again. My parents are not only horrible but also foolish. It's clear to me now that they still expect everything to go their way. They have no idea what I have planned. Time will reveal everything to them. Carl made a big mistake by teaming up with them. He'll face consequences too. I wrapped up my work as quickly as possible and rushed home. Blair had kept Eric safe at her house. Eric was visibly relieved to see me. Mom, you came back. I was afraid you wouldn't, Eric said anxiously. Eric, what are you talking about? I went on a business trip. Of course, I was coming back, I reassured him. Dad said you left me, Mom. He showed me pictures of his house and said he'd take me with him. I was scared. I didn't want to go, Eric explained, clearly distressed. Eric, listen to me. I will never let Carl take you or even come near you again. I'm staying right here with you, I promise, I assured him firmly. I spent a long time comforting Eric and ensuring he felt safe. It was upsetting to hear that Carl had been filling his head with lies about me abandoning him and trying to take him away. I was furious with Carl. CPS got involved and listened to Eric's account. They recommended therapy, and Eric is already attending sessions. I've also enrolled both of us in group therapy to help us heal from our experiences. Our therapist has been wonderful and supportive throughout. My lawyer used all the evidence of Carl's crimes in court. He's facing charges for attempted kidnapping and violating the restraining order, which could lead to jail time. Right now, I'm working on legally severing Carl's parental rights to Eric. My son deserves a good father, not an abuser like Carl. My lawyer is competent, and we're hopeful for a successful outcome. Eric, listen to me. I won't let Carl come near you ever again. I promise I'm staying right here with you, I reassured him. I spent a long time comforting Eric and making sure he felt okay. Carl had been saying hurtful things to Eric, like I abandoned him and Carl was going to take him away. I was really angry at Carl for spreading lies. Child Protective Services, CPS, got involved and listened to Eric's side of the story. They suggested therapy for him, and he's already attending sessions. I've also joined group therapy with Eric to help us both heal from what happened. Our therapist is really supportive and helps us work through our feelings. All the evidence of Carl's crimes was used by my lawyer in court. He's facing charges for trying to kidnap Eric and violating a restraining order, and he might go to jail. Right now, I'm working on making sure Carl loses his rights to be Eric's father. My son deserves a good dad, not someone who hurts him like Carl. My lawyer is very good, and we're hoping the legal process goes smoothly. My parents tried to sue me for grandparent rights, but the judge quickly dismissed their case when they saw my evidence and the texts my parents sent. I took further steps and got restraining orders against them, which the judge approved right away. I've moved with Eric to a different state because I got promoted at work to a higher position in a new city. It helped me get away from my parents. Blair visits us sometimes, and she's also cut off contact with our parents and might move closer to me soon. My parents are struggling financially now that Blair and I have stopped helping them out. They had to find extra jobs, and lawyer fees drained their savings, making them unstable. Meanwhile, Eric and I are doing really well in our new environment. I have no plans to reconnect with my parents or let Carl hurt my son again.
They were like strange creatures I'd never seen before. They congratulated me on marrying my brother. They said my dress was nice, but then one of them suggested that hers looked better. I felt like saying that might hurt the bride's feelings. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. In the room where the bride was getting ready, I was surprised by my sister-in-law and mother-in-law. They made rude comments with a sassy attitude. I couldn't believe how they talked down to me, and my sister-in-law's outfit was outrageous. Her dress was so white it could have been mistaken for a wedding dress, and it showed off her thighs through a slit. She even had fur wrapped around her off-shoulder design. My mother-in-law looked at her daughter with so much love. Meanwhile, my husband looked at them with a cold expression. I never thought I'd experience such bullying on my wedding day. It was too much to handle. Looking back, it's no wonder my sister-in-law's attempts at matchmaking never worked out, considering how she behaved even at someone else's wedding. My name is Anaya. I was born in a coastal town and grew up in a normal family. When I went to a state university, I stayed with my grandma, who lived nearby. Living with her, someone who always cared for me, was my dream. Her cozy old house blended Western and ethnic styles, giving it a nostalgic feel that I adored. Even after finding a job, I chose to stay there, enjoying moments on the balcony, chatting with grandma, and snacking on seasonal fruit. When grandma got sick, I took over caring for the house, hoping she'd recover, but sadly that wish never came true. As grandma's health declined, she moved to a facility in our hometown. I want to look after grandma, I insisted, but she smiled and told me, "You've done more than enough. I want you, Anaya, to find happiness." After grandma passed away, I married Jesse, who had always been there for me. Now we live in a house filled with memories of grandma, but our peaceful newlywed life is often disrupted by two troublesome women. How did someone like you, with such an ordinary face and slim figure, end up marrying my brother? One day, my mother-in-law asked me to make lunch for my sister-in-law, who had a meeting with the neighborhood association. Instead of thanks, my sister-in-law greeted me with sarcasm. I just wanted to leave, but if I did, they'd likely follow me home. Satisfied with her own conclusion, sister-in-law said, "Ask your brother." Well, maybe you two are a good match since he's not that great either. Then she quickly ate the curry I made. I think she believes that eating slowly in front of men makes her more attractive. My sister-in-law might seem mischievous, but what's really scary is her lack of consideration for others. She looks down on everyone, including me and her own brother, without a second thought. It's really tiring. And dealing with her mother, who raised her, is even more challenging. Instead of simply disliking me, my mother-in-law seems more focused on boosting her daughter up by putting me down and giving me orders. That's why she always asks me to do things. If I don't pay attention to her daughter, she'll either keep calling me or show up at my door nonstop. It's like a never-ending nightmare. Mother-in-law always made it clear that her daughter was her top priority and didn't seem to care much about her son, my husband. He insists he wasn't mistreated, but he also says he never felt valued. His father left for a work assignment 10 years ago and never came back, even after retiring. Despite this, he still sends money for their living expenses, so it seems neither mother-in-law nor sister-in-law care much about him. My husband tries to talk to them about their behavior, but they ignore him. To them, he's just another person to look down on. It broke my heart to see my husband suffer more than me, and I often gave in to mother-in-law's demands, which was a mistake. The two of them became increasingly difficult to bear, and as a couple, we grew exhausted. We couldn't continue like this. So determined, my husband and I decided to come up with a plan. Just when we were almost ready, mother-in-law and sister-in-law unexpectedly came to our house. It was a hot summer day, and my husband was at work. With reluctance, I greeted them. "Hello, sister-in-law. What brings you here?" Just because we're your cute sister-in-law and mother-in-law doesn't mean we need a reason to visit. You need to work on that stingy attitude. It's hot outside. Let us in. You're so thoughtless, sister-in-law snapped. I really didn't want to welcome them into Grandma's cherished house, but to avoid making a scene, I reluctantly let them in. I served them coffee and some cookies I had baked the day before. "What? No cake?" Sister-in-law complained. "I'm sorry we came unannounced." "Well, it's fine. Your cooking is all right, even if it's a bit simple," mother-in-law added. "That's true. We'll give you that," sister-in-law agreed. Strangely, their compliments felt more eerie than nice. "The house is old but roomy. It's decent," mother-in-law remarked. "To me, this house is just right," sister-in-law added. "Elle is getting married," mother-in-law suddenly dropped the bombshell. Wait, this self-centered sister-in-law. I was briefly shocked, but her getting married wasn't all that surprising. She often boasted about her shapely figure and her direct approach with men. It seemed to work on gullible men or those seeking casual relationships. "So, is it with the guy you had an affair with?" I remembered a man she had mentioned before. "It wasn't an affair, we just met in the wrong order. It's true love, but no, not him," she brushed off. "The one who recently approached you?" I just noticed his intense gaze and made the first move, but no, not him either. I met him at a speed dating event. He's the son of a wealthy man, mother-in-law proudly announced. "That's right, I'm having a shotgun wedding with a rich guy." "Good for Elle, unlike your brother who married someone like you," she added, taking a jab at me. "I'm already pregnant," she continued, driving her point home. The speed dating event was about 3 months ago. She probably charmed an unsuspecting man. "I feel sorry for him and his family," mother-in-law commented. "Did you end things with the other guys?" I asked. "Not yet. They all adore me so much, I can't bring myself to break it off. It's bound to happen eventually. Elle is just so charming. But what truly makes Elle happy is money," sister-in-law explained. I had a feeling, but I still wondered if the child was really fathered by that wealthy man. "We want to use this house for a pre-wedding family gathering." Their hidden agenda became clear. I was so disgusted that I blurted out my response, "Absolutely not." They glared at me, and to avoid a confrontation, I quickly tried to smooth things over. I didn't want to make a scene, so I scrambled to find the right words. I think a groom's family would prefer to see their future daughter-in-law's actual home, but our place is a bit messy, and it's just a small apartment. Then tidy up and stop smoking indoors, sister-in-law snapped back. "But won't it seem odd if they're invited to the bride's brother's place?" I expressed my worry. "You're not understanding. We'll just say this is Elle's family home. What if they find out the truth? As long as you and your husband keep quiet, it'll be fine. You're getting married, so pretending just for the introduction won't fix anything. Once we're married, he's mine, and besides, I'm pregnant," sister-in-law asserted. "It's not that simple. You're so thoughtful to be concerned. But why not just make this house truly belong to Mom and Dad?" Sister-in-law's absurd suggestions left me speechless. "Oh, come on. What a terrible idea. This house belongs to my grandma. It's not just up to me," I objected. "Don't you understand? Once you're married, everything belongs to the husband's family. It's a common rule, sister-in-law argued. Well, you better get used to it. What's yours is now ours. So next Sunday, we'll bring the fiance and his family over. And make sure to prepare a fancy and cute meal, of course. We'll pretend Elle made it and even change the curtains to match Elle's teeth, mother-in-law chimed in. We're relying on you, sister-in-law, they said before leaving, imposing their wishes and convenience on me. All that was left was my boiling anger and a stack of dirty dishes. I'm sorry, we won't let them use it, my husband said that night, his heart heavy after hearing the news. Of course not, but even if we say no, they'll just force their way in. Maybe we should accelerate our plan. I could handle their mistreatment of me, but I won't stand for them disrespecting Grandma's house. We'll make them pay for all the bullying, so be prepared, I declared. The next day, I made several calls. Despite the sudden change of plans, everyone was understanding. I was truly thankful. Once everything was arranged, I called mother-in-law. Mother-in-law, I want to make sure Elle's wedding is perfect. Can we have a bit more time? We're planning to renovate to make it just right for the couple, I proposed. Anaya, I misjudged you. You're truly kind-hearted. But we need to get going with the wedding preparations, so please hurry, she replied. I understand. We'll be ready in 3 weeks. Why don't you start searching for a wedding venue? I suggested. You're very considerate. It's almost surprising. But yes, we'll leave the introduction to you and focus on the wedding, she agreed. Was this our first pleasant conversation and perhaps our last? Those two won't suspect a thing, and they won't set foot in this house until the day of the wedding. Okay, we're going to be really busy starting today, my husband said. We had a very close deadline. We would work really hard without much rest, but it was all for our future. 3 weeks later, the day my mother-in-law had set for meeting us arrived. My husband and I were nervous, waiting for her phone call. I could almost imagine my mother-in-law's angry face as she called. At 10:00 a.m., my phone rang, showing my mother-in-law's name. I answered the call. Anaya, what did you do? My mother-in-law's voice sounded very upset. I thought you'd like it. I made a perfect meal for you and Elle, I replied. What did you do? She asked again, her voice getting louder and more panicked. But her words were hard to understand. The place she brought her fiance's family to, pretending it was her home, wasn't Grandma's house anymore. I had prepared a new home and meal for them, but it seems they weren't happy about it. Mother-in-law's words were still hard to understand. She probably wanted me to explain everything to the other side. I'll do that. I'm sorry if I made you upset. Can you put me on speaker so the groom's mother can hear? I asked. The shouting stopped and a calm woman's voice came through. Are you Aaron's mother? It seems there's been a mix-up. Oh wait, not Aaron, sorry, she corrected herself. So Aaron finally left his wife for Elle, or is it Ivan Phil? I listed all the men my sister-in-law had been involved with. Anaya, stop it. Mother-in-law screamed, louder than before. The call ended. They were probably in the middle of a big argument. Ah, that felt satisfying. Anaya, my husband, who had listened to the whole conversation, looked at me with apology in his eyes. I'm sorry for making you do that. I should have handled it, he said, sounding regretful. No, remember I said I wanted to get back at them one last time for Grandma's beloved house. Come on, I've explained this. Grandma wanted me to be happy. I love that house, but you're more important to me than it. My mother, Grandma's heir, had planned to demolish the house, turning it into vacant land. It was earthquake resistant, but keeping up an old house is hard. I had been insisting on living there because of my love for it, but after marrying my husband and dealing with my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, I changed my mind. I didn't want them to ruin that house. But I didn't want to leave my husband either. So I wanted to say goodbye to Grandma's house with good memories. That's why I asked my husband to find a new job, and we prepared to move back to my hometown. We just sped up our plans. I had Grandma's house demolished and built a small dog house in the middle of the empty land with a tag that says L. It looked like a cozy log cabin, but it cost us a bit more than we planned. I even got some fancy dog food from the pet store. Everything was set. Grandma liked you. She wouldn't want us to break up because of that house, Anaya. I promise I won't waste the chance you've given me, my husband said, looking at me with sincerity. I trusted him when he made that decision. It's been a year and a half since then. After we moved to my hometown, my husband, who was a bit unsure at first about the fishermen in the neighborhood, has become even more popular with them than I am. He seems to really enjoy the coastal town's breeze and all the seafood dishes. His once pale skin now has some color to it. Seeing him happily eating grilled salmon for dinner makes me really happy, I told him. Did you check your emails today? My husband asked. No, nothing new. They're probably busy. We haven't talked to my mother-in-law and sister-in-law since that whole thing happened. My husband's phone is the only way we could reach them, I said. We found out about the doghouse situation from a neighbor who was friends with Grandma. The house my mother-in-law and sister-in-law showed Grandma was torn down, and now there's just a doghouse there. And from the dog food bowl, there's a fancy smell of perfume, I added. The two were really upset, saying it was all because of my brother's wife. When the Fiances family got a hint over the phone about my sister-in-law's bad taste in men, they confronted them. They got really nervous and couldn't give a clear answer. Later, the Fiances' parents hired a detective to check on my sister-in-law's behavior, but they found nothing except lies and a lot of boyfriends. This made them do a DNA test on the unborn baby, and they found out it wasn't the rich man's. So the engagement was called off. The real father of the baby turned out to be one of the men my sister-in-law was seeing. He was happy to have a child with her, and they got married. But his mom was angry that her son was with an older woman she didn't like, so she insisted they all live together. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law was mad that her daughter was taken away, so she rented an apartment near the newlyweds and they fought a lot. My sister-in-law, who wanted to marry rich and have an easy life, now looks tired from dealing with her mother-in-law and doing housework and taking care of the baby. But the good part is, her husband really loves the baby, so they're managing on their own. My husband's phone rings. Oh, it's an invitation for drinks from my father-in-law. Your dad really likes you, I mentioned. I like hearing his stories, and my mother-in-law always makes my favorite food. I see now that my own mom never cared to know what I liked. This is what having a family feels like, my husband whispered. Don't worry, you'll be the kind of parent who knows all their child's favorites, I comforted him. As I said this, I gently rubbed my growing belly and he smiled warmly. I feel like we can make that happen in this house, he said, looking at the caramel-colored beam on the ceiling. It's a special beam we kept from Grandma's house when we tore it down. We put it in our new home as a reminder of Grandma. It was my husband's idea to keep the beam, even when I wanted to start fresh. That's why I chose to build our future with him. Let's make this house just as wonderful as Grandma's, I declared. Yes, definitely, my husband agreed. In this peaceful coastal town where you can hear the waves, our little house stands. This is where we'll create our happiness.
If you can't give me a grandchild, then we should consider divorce, Jones declared. I hesitated for a moment before responding, Fine, I got it. But just as he was about to finalize his decision, I surprised him with the news. I am pregnant. You see, I'm a homemaker in my 30s, living with my husband Jones, who works in an office. Our love story began when I was working at a food-related company. Over time, we spoke many times regarding transactions, and I found myself falling for his occasional smiles. So I decided to take the initiative and propose a relationship. However, when I proposed, Jones rejected me saying, I'm sorry, I appreciate your feelings, but I already have a girlfriend. Yet destiny had other plans. A month later, he approached me admitting, I broke up with my girlfriend and I would like to be with you. Apparently, since my confession, he couldn't stop thinking about me, which eventually led to his breakup with his girlfriend. I felt guilty for causing their breakup, but Jones reassured me with a smile, saying, Don't worry about it, it probably wouldn't have lasted long anyway. His kindness saved our budding relationship. After 3 years of being together, we got married. At that time, Jones expressed his desire to have children after marriage and asked if I could stay at home to support him and our future family. I wasn't particularly attached to my job at a somewhat toxic company, so I decided to quit and become a full-time homemaker. The transition from a working woman to a homemaker turned out to be more challenging than I expected. But I didn't mind because our newly life was sailing smoothly, and I was constantly brimming with happiness. We also had the advantage of Jones's family living just a 10-minute walk from our apartment. Initially, I worried about frequent visits and potential issues with his parents, but my fears were unfounded. They were incredibly kind and helpful, always ready to explain things to me gently and kindly. Despite our childlessness, they never complained, often telling me, "You are even dearer to us than a grandchild, and we only have boys in our family. We always wanted a daughter. Please let us pamper you like our real daughter." I had developed a strong bond with Jones's mother, Carol, and I trusted his father, Tom, who might be a man of few words, but he was incredibly reliable. However, this heartwarming relationship lasted only for the first few years. A few years into our marriage, the once kind attitude of Jones's parents began to change drastically. Gradually, Tom became even more reserved, and Carol underwent such a transformation that I began to suspect a dual personality within her. Perhaps, this harsh version of her was her true self. To quantify her change, if she was once at a plus 100 before, now she seemed to be at minus 100. That's how harshly she treated me. Living nearby, she started visiting our house frequently, especially when Jones was absent, nagging me incessantly and urging me to show her the face of my grandchild. According to her, it was a wife's duty. She would rush me to have a child. Although not long ago, she used to say, "Children are a gift from heaven. You don't have to try hard. You'll conceive naturally when the time comes, so don't rush." However, her attitude had taken a complete U-turn. She began to pressure me by mentioning other families, saying things like, "The family over there recently had a baby, and the woman next door is pregnant. What about you?" But no matter how much she pressed me for a grandchild, it was all meaningless if Jones wasn't ready. Despite his initial desire for children at the start of our marriage, a year into it, he had completely lost interest. Even my attempts to initiate intimacy were met with rejection. He would decline, saying he was tired, or dismiss me saying, "Don't interrupt my gaming." When I tried to explain this to Carol, she didn't seem to understand and continued pressuring me to have a child, increasing my stress day by day. Unable to endure her relentless attacks any longer, I finally confided in Jones about the pressure I was facing to have a grandchild. He grumbled his response, saying, "I don't think we need to rush this, you know." Despite his reluctance, he agreed to increase our intimate time together as much as possible. Despite our joint efforts as a couple, getting pregnant seemed elusive. Moreover, throughout this time, Carol kept hurling insults at us, blaming our lack of success on our supposed lack of effort. At times, I suspected that the accumulated stress caused by her constant pressure might be making it even harder to conceive. Unable to withstand her relentless pressure any longer, I reached my breaking point. As a couple, we finally decided to undergo fertility treatments, hoping it would solve our struggles with conception. However, relief was short-lived as a new issue arose, one that centered around Jones. Ever since we embarked on the fertility treatment journey, he began to grow distant, retreating to his room to play video games immediately after returning from work, ignoring my attempts at conversation. Initially, I could tolerate his behavior, but it worsened over time. Jones became increasingly irritable, lashing out over small expenses related to my hobby, and unloading his work stress on me. Whenever I tried to defend myself, he would quickly lose his temper, emphasizing his role as the provider and labeling me a freeloader. No matter how many times I reminded him that I had quit my job to fulfill his wishes, he remained unyielding. One day, when he should have been going to work, I discovered he had quit without informing me. When I questioned him about it, he dismissively replied that it was none of my business. I felt a mix of disgust and helplessness. While I believed we could manage financially for a while through unemployment benefits and dipping into our savings, the fact that he showed no interest in finding a new job stressed me out immensely. With Jones spending his days at home, his main activities revolving around gaming and occasional trips to the convenience store, our face-to-face interactions increased significantly. However, instead of fostering affectionate moments, this newfound time together only intensified our arguments. Our discussions became strained, and gradually, we stopped talking altogether. I found myself questioning the purpose of continuing this married life. The once strong bond between us seemed to be eroding, and the realization slowly settled in that our marriage might be reaching its breaking point. I began contemplating an escape from the dismal situation. One day, utterly fed up with Jones idling away his time, playing games at home like a child, I confronted him. "You're not a kid. Stop playing games all the time and start looking for a job," I admonished him sternly. His response caught me off guard. "Oh, by the way, my mom told me that if we can't have a baby, we should get a divorce," he said casually. To my surprise, I felt a surge of gratitude towards Carol, something I never anticipated. After all, I was pregnant. I had discovered this during a recent checkup, planning to tell him that very night. However, now it seemed like the right decision not to disclose the news. With newfound determination, I said, "Okay, got it." I retrieved the already filled-out divorce papers from a drawer and handed them to him. He seemed taken aback, clearly not expecting me to agree to the divorce, let alone produce ready-to-sign papers. He stuttered and froze on the spot, his usual domineering attitude nowhere to be seen. He appeared dumbfounded. Though he seemed on the verge of saying something, the weight of his mother's words weighed heavily on him. Eventually, he reluctantly signed the divorce papers, continuously sneaking glances at me. Later, we gathered to discuss matters like property division. In reality, we didn't have much in terms of assets to worry about. While he had previously complained about my spending habits, it turned out he was the one with the more reckless financial behavior. He not only played games at home, but also spent significant amounts of money at game centers, depleting his finances. We had no savings or assets to split, and Jones realized this with growing dismay. Despite this, he pointed to a passbook with considerable savings, suggesting we divide that as well. However, I informed him that this savings account was not subject to property division. "This is the savings I accumulated before our marriage, so it is not part of property division," I explained calmly. His face paled even more. He then tried to claim rights over the condo we lived in. Unfortunately for him, the condo was in my name, and I had already put it up for sale. "You can't live here anymore. It would be a nuisance, so please leave immediately," I said with a smile. "Besides, I thought this condo would become too small in the future, so I've been saving up for a new home," I added, watching his disbelief as I calmly asserted my independence. Saving money had always been my hobby, even when I had a regular job before marrying Jones. I had managed to save a significant amount, which I used to purchase this condo during a period of rapid advancement in my career. As a result, I owned substantial property. Even with the funds from selling the condo, I could afford to build a decent house downtown. Of course, all these assets were acquired during my single days, making them exempt from the current property division. It appeared my husband was unaware of this, as he seemed to believe he would be entitled to half of my assets. Upon realizing he wouldn't be part of the asset division, he was in a state of shock. We continued discussing, but he couldn't recover from his shock. With little left to discuss, the conversation ended swiftly. I submitted the divorce papers at the city office, and our divorce was finalized without a hitch. A few months later, I returned to my parents' home, where I received their unwavering support during the birth of my child. I safely delivered a healthy baby boy whom I named Ethan, a name borrowed from the Bible. Now, I spent my days contentedly with my loving child and parents. Of course, I hadn't informed Jones about our child, fearing Carol's interference if she found out. Meanwhile, Jones, who was evicted from the condo, retreated to his parents' home, but seemed to have become a recluse due to the shock of the easy agreement to the divorce. Occasionally, when he ventured out, his appearance seemed so suspicious that he often attracted the attention of law enforcement, making his situation quite pitiful. Later, I heard that he had quit his job due to interpersonal relationship issues. Apparently, he had a contentious attitude even at the office, especially disliked by female employees, leading to his isolation. Unable to cope, he abruptly quit one day. Perhaps he had always been that way, only showing kindness in front of me, a deceptive facade. 3 years later, I worked as the manager of a craft store, and it became a regular haunt for me. Around that time, the store owner approached me with an unexpected proposition. "I'm getting old and thinking of retiring. If it's all right with you, would you like to take over this store?" Considering my parents' active help with childcare, I had ample free time. The idea of having a job to keep myself occupied seemed appealing. Besides, declining the offer would inconvenience many regular customers, so I accepted without hesitation. As I was serving one of the occasional regular customers that day, I received an unexpected visit from Carol and Jones. Their thinly veiled flattery about the store irritated me. "Well, what brings you here?" I inquired. Carol mumbled something incomprehensible, eventually demanding, "Give my grandchild back to me." Evidently, she had learned about my child's birth and was contemplating making the child her heir. "Why did you keep it a secret?" "We were already in the process of divorcing," Jones accused, clearly agitated. "I kept quiet because I wanted the divorce. I knew you both would do anything to prevent it if you found out I was pregnant," I shot back, glaring at them. Carol persisted, insisting that I return her grandchild, emphasizing the 3 years we had spent together. Her demand left me utterly flabbergasted. Just then, my parents and Ethan entered the scene, sensing the tension. They asked, "What's the matter? Is there a problem?" It appeared that they hurried over after receiving a message from a regular customer. Spotting Ethan holding hands with my parents, Carol approached him, cooing, "Oh, how cute. He looks just like Jones when he was a child." "Look, I'm your grandma." I attempted to intervene, but Ethan, with surprising determination, declared, "I only have one grandma," and hugged my mother. Consequently, my mother politely asked Carol to leave. However, Jones attempted to forcibly take Ethan away from my parents, shouting, "Just give the kid to my mother." I stood in front of him, trying to protect Ethan, but my physical strength was no match for his. I was easily pushed aside. Jones was inches away from grabbing Ethan's arm when, out of nowhere, my father executed a perfect shoulder throw, sending Jones flying into the air. I looked up in astonishment to see my father, a skilled police officer who had even competed in national championships during his student days. Jones, completely unaware of my father's abilities, could only stare in pain and shock. My father, unfazed, said, "If you intend to bother my child and grandchild any further, I'm ready to take necessary actions. What do you want to do?" He showed his police badge to Carol, who turned pale, and they both hurried away. I never found out what happened to Carol and Jones after that, and frankly, I didn't want to know. Several years later, Ethan began aspiring to become a police officer, inspired by my father's courage and skills. "When I grow up, I'm going to be a police officer too, so I can protect Mom," he declared. Under my father's guidance, Ethan diligently worked on his studies, and his martial arts skills became unbeatable among his peers. I plan to continue watching over my wonderfully grown son, grateful for the support and protection my father had provided. Thank you for watching this video until the end. If you found the content relatable, please consider leaving a positive rating and a comment.
Emma smiled proudly, thinking she caught someone rummaging through garbage. Little did she know, this mistake would lead to her demise. "My name's Sally, I'm 32. I work at a TV and film studio fixing costumes. We have all sorts of outfits there, from fancy historical ones to modern clothes for shows. I adjust them to fit the actors and repair any damage from filming. I spend my days sewing, using machines and irons. I learned sewing from my mom when I was young, so this job feels like it's meant for me. Even though the hours can be odd and the workload heavy, I love what I do and hope to do it forever." I met my husband Joe while working at the studio. He looked after the actors there. Since we saw each other every day, we became close over time. 2 years later, despite our busy schedules, we got married. But just as we started our new life together, my mother got sick and passed away suddenly. This forced Joe and me to delay our wedding plans. Originally, we were going to have a simple ceremony with family at a local church. But now we had to save up for a proper wedding and honeymoon. Since our work hours were unpredictable, we decided not to rent a place to live temporarily. Instead, we moved in with Joe's mother, Emma, at his family home. Both Joe and I had lost our fathers early in life, so we understood each other's pain. Since my mother was the only parent left for me and Joe worried about his mother being alone, living together seemed like a good idea. I wanted us to get along with Emma, but it turned out to be a nightmare. Emma didn't want to accept me as part of the family. To her, I was like a thief who stole her son. As soon as we moved in, she started harassing me. Emma's criticisms were relentless. She pointed out every speck of dirt, making me feel like my upbringing must have been lacking. I endured her constant nagging, pushing myself to clean until my hands were raw and bleeding. Her standards for chores were sky high. Cleaning, laundry, cooking, everything had to be perfect. If it wasn't up to her standards, she made me do it again without a second thought. And the more tired I got, the worse it got. No matter how hard I tried, she always found fault. I even remember staying up all night scrubbing the sink once. It seemed like she was never happy with anything I did. She insisted I handle all the household chores, and when I tried to balance them with my job by working from home, she only made more demands. Every day felt like I was living Cinderella's story, slaving away at chores. Did you finish the laundry? There's a torn curtain upstairs. Fix it. You're good at sewing, right, Sally? I'm sorry, I have urgent work. Can't the curtain wait until the weekend? I pleaded, hoping for some understanding. What are you saying? If it's left like that, who knows what the neighbors will say? Fix it right away. Emma snapped back, showing no sympathy for my workload. I found myself constantly juggling work and chores, often working late into the night because there was always something to do. Emma seemed to take pleasure in seeing me worn out. She was like a cruel bully, especially when Joe wasn't around during the day. Our relationship felt more like that of a boss and a maid. I did all the housework, but I couldn't easily talk to Joe about it because of my pride. I tried my best to fulfill my duties, but it wasn't just the physical strain that wore me down. It was the constant mental pressure. Sometimes, Emma would invite neighbors over for lunch, and those occasions were unbearable. She would be even harsher in front of them, and I could hear them gossiping about me. Seriously, she's such a terrible daughter-in-law. I have to correct her every single day. My son doesn't see it, but I'm not fooled. She's just so unlikable and clueless. I listened to the neighbors' laughter, feeling like they were agreeing with Emma's harsh words. It hurt deeply. Even though chores could be finished, the hurtful words stayed with me. Every day felt like I was reaching my breaking point. If things kept going like this, I feared I might lose my sanity. But it wasn't just Emma. Joe had an older sister, Sarah, who was 38. Sarah lived nearby with her boyfriend and was quite tight with money. She'd often come over for lunch at our place, probably to save on food costs. What made it hard was that she never gave a heads up about her visits. So I couldn't prepare enough food for her. She'd just show up, eat, and leave. And she had this habit of claiming everything as hers. Things at her parents' house or ours, it didn't matter. One day, I finally spoke up, "Sarah, could you please let me know before you take something?" She must have told Emma about it. "Did you tell Sarah not to come over anymore?" Emma confronted me. "What? No, I didn't say that." I defended myself. "So you're saying Sarah's lying?" Caught between Sarah's deceit and Emma's cruelty, dealing with either one alone was already tough. But having to face both of them together made the mental burden even heavier. One day, as I walked past the room where Sarah and Emma were talking, their voices were loud enough for me to overhear. "It's like having a free maid." "How nice." "I'm jealous." "Send her to my house too," Sarah remarked. "Maid? Am I not a daughter-in-law?" I couldn't help but interject. I had secretly thought of myself as nothing more than a maid, but hearing it said out loud was unbearable. It felt like something inside me snapped. That night, I finally opened up to Joe about how I was feeling. "I can't do this anymore. I tried to be patient, but living with Emma is unbearable. Please, I want us to move somewhere else," I confessed to Joe, feeling a weight lifting off my shoulders. After a moment of silence, Joe replied, "Okay, we've saved up enough money. Let's find a new place soon." "Really? I'll start looking for a place right away," I said, tears of relief streaming down my face. Little did we know, Emma was standing right outside our room, overhearing our conversation. We had no clue this would trigger her strange behavior later on. But from that day forward, the once oppressive days started to feel brighter. I had one dream, to wear a wedding dress that I had made for my own wedding. After all, sewing was my profession. Filled with determination after talking with Joe, I immediately ordered a large amount of fabric online. I decided to focus on making the dress as my new purpose. That's what I resolved to do. I began sewing the dress secretly in my room, away from Emma and Sarah. But one day Sarah, who often popped by unannounced, caught me. "Wow, what's this dress? It's beautiful to have your own handmade dress," she remarked. "Hey Sally, I'm getting married in 2 months. Could you make my dress too, please?" "Yes, renting is just a waste of money. I want to keep wedding costs low, so please," she insisted, true to her penny-pinching nature. I hesitated, but since she agreed to cover the material costs, I agreed to make it. I started working on Sarah's dress first, since our wedding was still far off. Sarah asked me to keep it a secret from Mom, hinting that she planned to tell Emma she was renting the dress to get financial support from her. Whatever Sarah paid me for materials, she was determined to get back. Her thriftiness was almost impressive. I even talked to Joe about it, and he said, "Sis never backs down once she decides something. I'm sorry, but it would really help if you could make it for her." With his encouragement, I agreed, feeling positive and motivated since I was getting paid. I saw it as practice for making my own dress without spending on materials. I also hoped it might improve my relationship with Sarah, so I focused on dressmaking between housework and my main job. Even Emma seemed to catch on to what I was doing. She'd occasionally peek into my room. Sarah's wedding was coming up fast, and the dress was almost done. Then one day, Emma came into my room with a smile. "You're working hard again today, aren't you tired?" Her sudden change in attitude was unsettling. "I'm going to make some coffee. Why don't you take a break?" she offered. "Really? That would be great. Thank you," I replied. As Emma left humming, I felt a strange unease. Emma making coffee for me? That was unheard of. Could it be something more sinister? Different thoughts raced through my mind, but I tried not to worry. I got back to work, adding the final touches of lace. The end was in sight. Despite it being Sarah's dress, I found myself putting love into it. Suddenly, I smelled coffee. Emma knocked on the door. "Sally, may I come in?" she asked. "Oh, well, sure," I replied. The next moment, I was shocked. Emma entered with a tray piled high with cups and saucers, all filled with coffee. "Emma, wait, it wasn't just for two," I protested. It looked like she was preparing for a party. The tray was so heavy her arms trembled as I instinctively moved to stop her from entering further. "Oops," Emma pretended to trip. The sound of cups breaking and coffee splashing everywhere filled the room. For a moment, I couldn't comprehend what happened. Everything felt like slow motion. Looking down, my yellow-colored dress was stained like a giraffe pattern. "Ah!" I screamed involuntarily. I did miss the brief smile on Emma's face. "Oh no, I'm so sorry. It wasn't on purpose. Did you get burned?" "Wait, is that a dress?" "I thought you were going through trash," she babbled. I was speechless. The shock of her actions left me frozen. Then Emma feigned concern. "Oh dear, you can't have your wedding like this, can you?" My suspicions turned into certainty. Emma was trying to sabotage our wedding. Her plan was to ruin our plans to move out after the wedding. But I couldn't afford to be angry now. I rushed to the bathroom with the stained dress, frantically rinsing off the coffee. I knew the stain would set if I didn't act fast. Emma watched with a malicious grin, offering help that I coldly refused. I was filled with anger and panic. Then someone unexpected appeared behind Emma. It was Sarah. "What's this? Are you bullying Sally again?" Sarah questioned, noticing the tension. "No, I just accidentally spilled coffee on her dress," Emma replied, seemingly enjoying the situation. But then things took an unexpected turn. "What? Are you serious? That's my dress." "Wait, what?" Sarah exclaimed, bewildered. Emma was speechless, realizing her mistake. "Yours, Sarah? What do you mean? I can't believe this. I had her make my dress. What am I going to do? My wedding is in 2 weeks." Emma panicked like never before, while I listened to the ridiculous exchange. I continued washing the dress I had been working on for months for my sister-in-law. As I washed, I realized something. I hadn't told anyone. I was making the dress for Sarah, so Emma must have thought the dress was for me. She wouldn't have deliberately spilled coffee otherwise. If she had known it was for Sarah, there'd be no reason to ruin it. Joe and I planned to leave this dreaded family home after the wedding. To Emma, I was always the intruder who stole her beloved son. She couldn't bear the thought of me taking him away, so she tried to sabotage our wedding, thinking it would keep her son at home. Such petty thoughts led to Emma's bizarre actions. Sarah was furious, blaming Emma and attacking her. "How could you do this? Everything is ruined. I can't believe my own mother would destroy my wedding," she exclaimed. "I'm sorry, Sarah. Please forgive me. I didn't know it was your dress." "You don't think I did it on purpose, do you?" Emma finally spoke her true feelings while I pretended not to hear and continued washing the dress. Then a man's voice interrupted. "So you thought it was Sally's dress and deliberately stained it?" Everyone turned around at once. "Oh, Joe, when did you get here?" I asked, surprised by his sudden appearance. Joe stood there with a mix of disappointment and disbelief on his face. I had been so focused on washing the dress and listening to their argument that I hadn't noticed Joe's arrival. He had been silently observing the ugly quarrel between his mother and sister. Joe began to speak slowly, his disappointment evident. "You saw Sally working hard on that dress every night, and yet you deliberately stained it. That's truly despicable," he said sternly. Emma and Sarah were taken aback. Emma, in particular, had probably never imagined being scolded by her son, whom she cherished so much. Joe continued calmly yet sadly, "I'm disappointed, Mom. Sally endured your attitude all this time, hoping that one day you might change. She was patient for my sake because you're my mom." His words brought tears to my eyes. I had mistaken Joe's kindness for indecisiveness and submission to his mother, but now I saw him as a man determined to protect the woman he loved. Joe's firm stance, though unexpected, made me fall for him all over again. He addressed Emma, "And it all comes down to this. I can't overlook it, Mom. Sorry, but Sally and I are leaving this place as soon as possible. I'll stay until the wedding for your sake, but I can't stay any longer. This time it was just a dress. But who knows, Sally could be in danger next time. It'll be too late then, Mom." "Danger? I would never put her in danger. How can you even say that after ruining Sally's hard work so casually?" Emma's denial was met with Joe's palpable anger. Despite his frustration, Joe didn't resort to harsh words or an overbearing attitude. Instead, he quietly expressed his anger towards Emma. His expression, a mix of anger and deep sadness, was something I had never seen before. He was confronting everything he believed about his mother, who had always doted on him. Emma's usual quick wit and aggressive remarks were replaced by tears, leaving her speechless. Even Sarah was stunned, shifting her gaze between Joe and Emma. Later, Sarah decided to cancel her wedding, so close to the date, and she wouldn't get any of her money back. "It's not my fault at all. Emma was the one who paid for it," Sarah insisted. So Sarah wasn't losing any money, but Emma seemed to finally regret her thoughtless harassment that had gone too far. The shock of being scolded by her son also left her weakened. But the consequences weren't confined to our house. Sarah's sudden cancellation angered her boyfriend and his family, leading to their breakup. Sarah continually blamed Emma for this outcome. After we left the family home, Emma occasionally contacted us, asking for money. One reason she didn't want us to leave was the financial aspect. While living together, we contributed to the household expenses, but Emma had no income apart from her pension. It seemed she had been relying on our money. Every time Emma called asking for money, Joe refused. "Mom, why don't you work? There are plenty of jobs out there. We need to be independent, you and us. Please leave us alone," Joe pleaded. Despite Emma's pleas not to be abandoned, Joe remained firm. His sense of duty seemed to drive his resolve. Eventually, Emma found work as a janitor, which ironically suited her strictness with cleaning. It was somewhat amusing. Meanwhile, Sarah, after breaking up with her boyfriend and moving back in with Emma, stopped working altogether. She relied on Emma's part-time income and pension. I saw her once, and she was unrecognizably overweight. Joe and I moved into an apartment and are enjoying our new happy life, free from snide remarks and sarcasm. Our life now is blissful compared to our time in that dysfunctional family home. We finally set a date for our wedding, a small ceremony with just friends and colleagues. We chose not to invite Emma and Sarah to avoid any disturbances, especially considering their difficult situations. But that's how it has to be. They brought it upon themselves. I've started making a new dress for the big day. It's going to be much more beautiful than the one that ended up with a giraffe pattern.
Oh, isn't this exquisite? It's not just lovely, it's a pink diamond, and it comes with a price tag of $50,000. My mother-in-law, who couldn't be bothered to attend my own mother's funeral, appears to be relishing a lavish getaway with her friends, completely oblivious to my presence. She gleefully shared details about her new sparkling pink diamond ring, seemingly fueled by jealousy towards a friend who flaunted a similar ring. In her triumph, she revels in having outdone her friend by choosing a more expensive ring from the same store. However, the reality is far from what it seems. It's implausible for her to afford such a costly item, and it turns out she had secretly taken money from my husband's safe to make the purchase. This money, crucial for her future, had been earmarked for her nursing home fees. My name is Hillary Johnson, a 46-year-old woman living with my husband Steve, who is 7 years my senior, and our high school senior daughter Gina. Despite not being wealthy, we lead a stable life. I have worked part-time at a local drugstore for over a decade, and my hobby is cultivating herbs. Lately, I've been challenging myself with a medical herb certification exam. Gina and I often discuss her future dreams, bringing us joy. 6 months ago, my father-in-law passed away, introducing significant changes to our modest lifestyle. According to his will, the house went to Steve, and the cash to my mother-in-law. The money was intended for her nursing home fees, given her age of 75. Despite this, she pleaded tearfully to live in the house, and after much debate, we agreed to cohabitate for a year while searching for a suitable home. The area where the family home is situated has now become a popular high-end residential area. Still, we are not wealthy. It's an old land holding. I learned that my mother-in-law had a habit of spending recklessly, and though I had prepared for it to some extent, the reality was shocking. As Steve heads out for dinner shopping, my mother-in-law, on the first day of our cohabitation, casually asks, "Hillary, could you lend me some money? I'm going out." "Thank you. Just in case something comes up, and I need more, give me $100 for now," she says under the pretext of buying dinner. I found myself pondering how much groceries she intended to purchase. Despite my reservations, I made the mistake of giving her the requested amount. 2 hours later, she returned by taxi, laden with bags from an upscale department store filled with expensive deli items and sweets. Tonight, we feast. I wanted to try these side dishes. They're supposed to be delicious, and we have desserts too, she exclaimed proudly. Curious, I asked, "Mother, how much did this cost?" She replied, "Well, let's see. I went a bit over because of the taxi, but I covered the extra, so it's fine." Her proud declaration left me speechless, but little did I know this was just the beginning. Managing finances became my biggest headache after moving to the family home. While my father-in-law was alive, we used online supermarkets for groceries, paying with his card. Learning from my initial mistake of giving her large sums of money, I no longer entrusted her with shopping and kept the wallet in a locked drawer. Unhappy with not receiving money, she stopped doing any housework, caring only for the flowers at the entrance. Despite our monthly allowance of $300, she squandered it on clothes, beauty salons, meals, or coffee with neighbors. By mid-month, she would usually run out of money and ask for more. Frustrated by her reckless spending, as I was saving for my daughter's education, I calmly admonished her when she requested more money for a lunch date with friends. Even Steve, who works, gets an allowance of $300. I can't give you more than someone who's working, so please use it more wisely. Dissatisfied, she returned to her room, likely to ask Steve for money later. The allowance came from the nursing home fund, and if it diminished, it would be her who suffered. When Steve came home, I expressed my concerns. "Did your mother ask you for more allowance again?" He replied, "Yes, she did. But I can't be too hard on her. She must be lonely without Dad. She's always been vain, you know. But I want to fulfill her wishes for at least this year that she's here." "I understand, but your kindness isn't truly benefiting her. Besides, it will eventually have repercussions for us." "You're right. I get it. My mother-in-law had a tendency to flaunt, especially in front of her 3 old friends who were mothers of my husband's classmates living in the neighborhood. I became aware of this during the funeral arrangements for my father-in-law." "Steve, it's your father's funeral, so arrange the altar this way and get more extravagant flowers. The neighbors are coming. Don't embarrass your father," she instructed. Steve, being the spouse, complied with her demands to some extent, but the costs were significantly high. My mother-in-law's primary aim was to show off to the neighbors. I even felt sympathy for her, having to keep up with people from a different lifestyle. During the funeral, she only greeted 3 families of her friends. One day, after having lunch with her friends, she came back excited, her eyes sparkling. Today, Debbie showed me a ring worth $20,000 that she got from her husband for their golden wedding anniversary. I've never seen a $20,000 ring before. That's a wonderful gift. You don't have such wealthy friends, do you, Hillary? You'll probably never see anything like that in your life, she remarked with superiority and sarcasm, using her friends to boast. Hillary, you're so plain. Why don't you put on some makeup? Have you never been to an upscale lunch? It was all about one-upping me. I tried to ignore her words, but she seemed increasingly hostile towards me, especially after I refused to give her more money. After settling my father-in-law's affairs and starting to look for a nursing home, my mother's health took a turn for the worse. When my sister and I rushed to the hospital, the doctor informed us that she had about 3 months to live due to advanced cancer. She was in a fragile state and could deteriorate at any time. My mother had occasionally mentioned feeling unwell before, but being a person of great endurance, it wasn't easy for her to show any signs of weakness. I regretted not paying more attention to her. I asked my sister to stay with her while I went to fetch some clothes and valuables from her apartment. As I packed a large bag in her room, I found some cash, likely her living expenses for the month, in a drawer. I took the cash with me, planning to shower and head back to the hospital. I left the bag in Steve's upstairs room and, after getting ready, noticed the zipper slightly open. A sense of unease washed over me as I checked the bag and found the cash missing. Suppressing my rising anger, I went downstairs to my mother-in-law's room. "Mother, may I ask you something?" I inquired as she prepared to leave. Turning around, she asked, "How's your mother doing? I have plans with my friends right now." I confronted her. "The money that was in the bag in our room, you have it, don't you? That money belongs to my mother. Please return it." "I don't know what you're talking about. I never go upstairs." "Are you accusing me of stealing?" she retorted, rushing past me and heading for the door. "I'm going out for a fancy Chinese dinner with my friends tonight, so I don't need your poor excuse for a meal. Give my regards to your mother." With a smirk on her face, she left the house, leaving me in shock. Just then, Jenna came home and asked, "Mom, are you okay?" "Your grandmother's money. My mother-in-law took it." Unable to confront her without evidence, tears naturally started to fall from my eyes. Jenna gently stroked my back to calm me down. "That's terrible. It must have been her. I've seen her coming down from upstairs before. To think she would stoop to taking your grandmother's money. I can't forgive her. But how's Grandma? If you're going to the hospital, I'll come with you. Let's think of a way to get back at her." As we walked, Jenna's words encouraged me, lightening my heart a bit. Despite feeling sorry for my father-in-law, I decided to protect my family in my own way. A few days later, my mother's condition suddenly worsened, and she passed away. In her final days, she was mostly in a daze, occasionally lucid. I expressed my gratitude to her repeatedly for raising me, for her love, for Gina's future dreams, for the plans with Steve, and for our old age. She didn't speak, but her eyes smiled gently and sometimes nodded. While talking to her, I remembered a visit to my father-in-law before his death. He had thought about divorcing my mother-in-law, but didn't want to trouble his son and his wife. He asked me to sell the house and put my mother-in-law in a nursing home after his death. That's when he told me about her spending habits. Her attitude changed when Steve started kindergarten, living in a wealthy area, feeling pressure to keep up with rich neighbors. She deluded herself into thinking she was wealthy too, possibly fueled by Steve's success in a famous company. I regretted not putting her in a nursing home sooner. It could have prevented the theft of my mother's money. Steve and Gina arrived in time for my mother's final moments, but only my sister and her husband were there at the end. When we returned home to prepare for the funeral, my mother-in-law was out. I decided to show her the last bit of kindness. We held a small funeral for my mother without her presence. I tried calling her, but she was out and never answered. When I returned home after the funeral, everything was quiet as if she had stayed out overnight. Then, my mother-in-law returned in a good mood. "My condolences for your loss. It must have been hard," she greeted me. I noticed a shiny new jewel in her hand that I had never seen before. "Elvis, look, isn't it beautiful?" "A pink diamond. It cost $50,000. How did you get that, Mother?" I asked. She replied, "I bought it, of course. Debbie introduced me to the store. It's a reservation-only place in New York City, so I went for an overnight stay with my friends. The hotel we stayed at, and the meals were wonderful." To my astonishment, my mother-in-law indulged in luxuries during my mother's funeral, enjoying an overnight trip to New York with friends. I was left speechless with disbelief. I bought something even more expensive than what Debbie showed me. "Feels good, Mother," my mother-in-law declared. I couldn't comprehend how she obtained such an expensive item. "You don't have that kind of money. How did you get it?" I questioned. Nonchalantly, she replied, "Oh, I found it in Steve's room safe. My passbook was in there with exactly $50,000. Since it's in my passbook, it's my money, right?" I felt frozen and disappointed by her actions during my mother's funeral, although, in all honesty, her behavior was somewhat expected. It was confirmed that she had entered our room upstairs. The passbook was in the safe of the study room that Steve now uses. The safe was an old dial type, and Steve, finding it tedious to turn the dial, left it unlocked, thinking the study was locked anyway. On the day my mother passed away, I intentionally left the study unlocked, suspecting that she might take the opportunity to enter our room and take the passbook from the safe. That $50,000 is from my father's inheritance. "Do you understand what that means?" I asked her. Unperturbed, she replied, "I know it's my money left by your father. So what's wrong with using it?" I began to feel pity for my mother-in-law. "Sure, it's your money and you're free to use it. But that was meant for your old age. We'll be moving out, so please manage on your own from now on." At first, my mother-in-law looked confused, but she slowly turned pale as she understood my words. "Wait, isn't there a separate fund for the nursing home? It's more than this amount, right?" she inquired. I explained, yes, there was more, but it decreased due to the inflated funeral costs of my father-in-law and your monthly requests for more allowance from Steve. Feeling the need to illustrate the alternatives, I handed her brochures of lovely nursing homes I had collected over several months. She looked at them speechless and shaking. At that moment, Steve and Gina came down from upstairs. I had reported to them after opening the study, so they had come to check. Steve, initially skeptical that his mother had stolen the money, had no complaints about what I did. While I would have properly arranged for my mother-in-law's nursing home if nothing had happened, her intrusion into our room and the theft of the money prompted me to protect my family. I had made it clear that entering our room and touching the money was unacceptable. I decided to sever ties with her for life. "Steve, you'll stay in this house, right? It's sad to sell a house filled with memories, but taking care of parents is a son's duty." I desperately clung to Steve. Checking the safe, I realized she had taken more than the passbook, the cash I withdrew for the car inspection too. That's too much. I trusted you, Steve, I said, shocked by her actions. Struggling to speak, Steve admitted, "Oh, I have it. Just borrowed a bit. It was $11,000. But that wasn't all." "What about Hillary's mother's money?" I demanded. Panicking, she replied, "Oh, I'll return that too." "Then it's fine, right, Hillary? You'll forgive me now, won't you?" She hastily handed me the money, possibly pretending about the $50,000 ring. Until the end, there were no words of apology about my mother's money. "I'm sorry, but I can't live with you anymore. I'll protect my own family from now on," I declared. She broke down crying, clinging to Steve till the end. However, Steve's grief-stricken anger was intense, and he acted quickly. He sold her belongings to create a lump sum and found a nursing home affordable on her pension. The chosen home, though, was far from the family home. I probably won't see her again in my lifetime. Steve occasionally gets calls from the home, and she seems calmer now, possibly settling into her new environment. I regretted not placing her in a home earlier. Perhaps if we hadn't lived in that house, her life might have been happier. A part of me felt a little sympathy for her. After she left, we moved, waiting for Jenna's graduation. Jenna got into her desired university and started living on her own. The family home, being in a popular area, quickly found a buyer. Steve is now applying for a transfer to a branch near the sea. We plan to spend a few years until retirement there, searching for our final home. We hope to continue living peacefully and harmoniously as a family.
I thought you were a good daughter-in-law, but it seems I was wrong. Leave this house and never come back. You're nothing but a parasite. Pack your things and go. Ever since my husband passed away, my mother-in-law Sarah and sister-in-law Catherine have been saying mean things to me. Even though I've been taking care of Sarah, my husband was worried about her until the end. And yet Catherine says bad things about him, and I couldn't help but argue back. If you both feel that way, I understand. I'll leave. When I said that, Sarah and Catherine were happy, but a few months later, they were begging me. The bad luck I wished for them was worse than I thought. My name is Emily. I'm 32 years old and work as a buyer for famous brands. I met my husband Tom through a friend. Tom was kind and calm, just the husband I wanted, so I said yes when he proposed. Tom's parents were independent, so I got along well with them and didn't have any problems with my mother-in-law. Having a caring mother-in-law and practical father-in-law seemed perfect to me. Tom worried about his mom's financial future because she didn't think much about money. He thought it would be fine as long as his dad, who was responsible with money, was healthy. Tom also had an older sister, Catherine, who was divorced and lived alone. He figured she'd take care of their parents later on. But Tom didn't fully trust Catherine. I'm worried about giving our family money matters to Catherine. Why? There were problems before. I didn't think much about Catherine's past then, but later, Tom's worries turned out to be true. After I married Tom and had a few peaceful years, his dad got sicker and died. Since Sarah always depended on her husband, she was devastated. It's tough now, Sarah, but let's try to move on. I've always let my husband handle everything. I don't know how to do it alone. Tom was worried about his mom living alone, and I share his concern. As our son, he must have been really stressed about it. Then, one night, he came to me with an idea. Emily, what if my mom comes to live with us? It was unexpected, but I had a feeling he might suggest this someday. But what about Catherine? What about her? Shouldn't she, as the daughter, take care of mom instead of us? I want to step up and take dad's place, looking after mom. She's not great with money, so I'll handle her finances too. Can't we ask Catherine to do that? No, that won't work. It was rare for Tom to firmly say no to my idea. I want to make sure dad's money is well taken care of, so mom won't struggle later on. Even though he felt bad about asking me to live together, Tom was determined to handle dad's inheritance and savings. It's okay. I think we'll all be happy living together with your mom. I'm genuinely worried about her being alone too. Oh, Emily, thank you so much. And so we started our new life as a family of 3 in Sarah's house. Just like she promised, Sarah left everything for her husband to handle, from bank accounts to bills and credit cards. She didn't really understand any of it. Tom managed her money separately from ours and decided to give her a monthly allowance for her expenses. Whenever Sarah was tempted by dodgy salespeople or pressured to buy expensive stuff by friends, it was Tom's job to guide her. If he didn't, she might end up with a lot of debt because she was careless with money. By taking on the role of her husband, Tom made his mom happy. Seeing her happier also made Tom feel better. Sarah helped out with the household chores since I was working, and everything was going smoothly. But our peaceful life came to an abrupt halt. Tom collapsed at work. He had the same illness as his dad and might have pushed himself too hard during a busy time, ending up in the hospital. Sarah and I visited him almost every day, but Tom didn't seem to be getting better. Emily, I need to talk to you about what happens after I'm gone. Don't say that. Let's focus on getting you better so we can go back to living with your mom, just like before. I knew I might get sick like Dad, so I'm prepared. But there's one thing I need you to do for me regarding Mom. Trying to hold back tears, I listened closely to my husband's last request. A few weeks later, Tom passed away. Dealing with telling relatives, sorting things out with his job, and planning the funeral kept me busy and distracted from the grief. Once everything was settled, I remembered what Tom had asked of me. There was no time to mourn now. I had to step into Tom's shoes and take care of my mother-in-law. I'm sorry I've been occupied lately, Sarah. From now on, I'll handle the money matters instead of Tom. Don't worry, I'll make sure we have enough for our monthly expenses. Emily, are you still going to stay with me now that Tom is gone? Absolutely. Tom always told me to take care of you. Let's keep supporting each other. I understand. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she spoke. I'm sorry for putting the burden of finances on you while you're already busy. Don't worry, keeping busy helps me cope, so it's actually helpful. But Catherine didn't seem happy about me living with her mom. When she found out I was not only staying but also handling the money, she burst into the house in anger. Why is Emily, an outsider, still here after Tom's gone? And why is she in charge of the money? Doesn't that seem strange to you? Before Tom passed away, he asked me to take care of Sarah and handle the finances. Are you just saying that conveniently? No, it's what Tom wanted. Is there some hidden reason behind this? And are you using Tom's name to your advantage? Catherine wasn't convinced, but she backed off for the time being. However, the next week she came back furious. Emily, what do you think you're doing? I saw everything. What are you talking about? You're having an affair, aren't you? An affair? I saw you going into a men's store and dining at a fancy restaurant with a man. Are you using Tom's money on your lover? That's not true. I haven't spent any money like that on someone else. Your excuses won't cut it. It hasn't been long since Tom passed away, and you're already moving on to someone new. Have you no shame? Mother, don't you agree? Influenced by Catherine's words, Sarah started to doubt me too. Emily, is it true? No, that's not what happened. I'm just following Tom's wishes, I tried to explain, but Catherine interrupted me. How dare you bring up Tom's name after cheating on him? How could you sink so low? I fell silent, feeling the cold stares from both Catherine and Sarah. Then Sarah spoke up. I used to think you were a good daughter-in-law, but I was wrong. I never want to see you again. Leave, Catherine chimed in triumphantly. That's right, parasites like you don't belong here. Determined not to let Tom's wishes go to waste, I endured it all. With that resolve, I remained silent. But Sarah and Catherine didn't stop there. They continued to hurl hurtful words at me. Poor Tom, picking someone like you. He was always so easily fooled, you know. Maybe he tricked you into thinking he'd handle the money, but actually used Mom's money for himself. To tarnish Tom's memory, especially when he cared so much about his mom, is unforgivable to me. I could handle them saying bad things about me, but I can't stand them insulting my late husband. I'm sorry, Tom, for not keeping our promise. I silently apologized to him as I turned to Sarah and Catherine. I understand. I'll leave like you both want. Hearing my words, the two exchanged looks and grinned. Finally seeing reason, huh? Leave the bank book here when you go. Sure. I handed over the bank book containing Sarah's living expenses and her husband's inheritance, then left the house. But 3 months later, I got a call from Sarah, whom I had distanced myself from. "Emily, they're saying I can't pay my card bill." "Why? What's happening?" "Maybe you spent too much and don't have enough left. You should check your balance using your bank book." "Balance? How do I do that?" It seems Sarah hadn't changed. She was still careless about money even after I left. As I thought this, Sarah started yelling at me angrily. "This never happened when you were here. Suddenly after you left, the money's gone. You must have stolen it. I can't believe this. Come here right now." Furious, Sarah hung up the phone. Feeling heavy-hearted, I reluctantly went to her house. When I arrived, both Sarah and Catherine were waiting for me. Ignoring Sarah's anger, I accessed her online banking, checked the balance, and showed it to her. Here's the transaction history for this account. As you can see, while I was managing it, the balance never went negative. Do you understand why? Because I was saving money. It's hard to believe that you, who aren't good with money, would suddenly start saving. Actually, the balance stayed positive because I was depositing $1,500 every month for living expenses. Living expenses? I didn't know about that. Tom and I did it while he was alive. We decided to use our money to cover your expenses, so your savings wouldn't go down. Really? Tom did that? Yes, even after he passed away, I kept doing it with $1,500 from my own salary. But when you asked me to leave, I stopped. Then I continued, showing Sarah the transaction details. Let's see the transactions after I left. There are more than $1,500 being taken out, suggesting big expenses. I didn't change my spending habits. Maybe Catherine used it. With that, I shifted the conversation to Catherine. Looking at the details, there were card payments at fancy stores and restaurants. I can't picture Sarah spending money at those places. Catherine, do you have any clue? It wasn't me, but I can't think of anyone else who might have used it but you. Could it be you? Did you secretly use a family card or something? I've seen you at those shops and restaurants before. Even now, you're still using Mom's money. How low can you go? Can you just stop? I was there for work. The meals were for a meeting with a shop owner. Just because I say it's for work, you think you can't trust me. Fine, let's confirm it right now. I immediately called the shop owner. Thank you for always helping us out. Yes, it was last Friday, and the item was... Well, I was checking some details on the phone. Catherine just stared blankly. Thank you. Can you include that as well? Oh, I see. After ending the call and checking my email, I showed Catherine and Sarah the attached photo. It showed Catherine shopping at the store. What's this? Catherine looked shocked as she saw the photo. It seems the security camera caught you, Catherine, buying these luxury items. When I spoke to the shop owner, they confirmed it right away. I'm pretty sure the person in this photo is you. Don't you agree? Catherine was speechless. The shop owner also mentioned that items matching the ones you bought have been showing up at pawn shops lately. The dates and items match the ones when you used the card, right? Catherine's voice shook, and she seemed confused. Sarah, looking puzzled, asked Catherine, but why go through all this trouble? Buying something and then selling it to a pawn shop right away? Since Catherine didn't seem willing to answer, I spoke up. She probably needed cash quickly. If she took it straight from the bank account, it would have been noticed right away. So you tried to frame me by shopping at my workplace, making it look like I was the one spending money, didn't you? Catherine couldn't defend herself and stayed silent. Meanwhile, Sarah seemed to have more questions and kept pressing Catherine. Catherine, why do you need so much money? Well, I had debts to repay, Catherine confessed quietly. But I added more to her confession. You didn't tell Sarah about it, did you? Do you know why Catherine got divorced? It was because of her debts. Tom often mentioned how troubled he was because Catherine kept asking to borrow money. This has been going on since before Catherine got married. Even after she got married, Tom complained that Catherine's spending habits hadn't changed. You had debts. Sarah then remembered something. The money your father left you, Catherine. I gave you a bank book with the inheritance in it, didn't I? Don't tell me even that money. At Sarah's request, I checked the balance of the bank account where the inheritance was kept. Sarah, the bank account is completely empty. What? Completely empty. But a few days after I left the house, All the money was taken out of the account. No, this can't be. Sarah collapsed to her knees, yelling at Catherine in anger. What's the problem? I had to meet my repayment deadline. My father would have let me, his daughter, use the inheritance however I wanted. I can't believe Sarah is so stunned. It seems Tom was right all along. He always said letting Catherine handle money was risky. He probably saw this coming. Sarah gave Catherine a stern look. That money wasn't just for me, you know. You got your share of the inheritance, right? Who uses someone else's money? You're the one taking advantage of this house. Leave. We're done, Mom. Wait, didn't we agree that I would live here in Emily's place after she left? If I stay with someone like you, I'll end up in debt too. I expect you to return every cent of your father's inheritance. With those words, Sarah forcefully kicked Catherine out of the house. However, I'm unsure if it was the right outcome. Since then, we've lost all contact with Catherine, and Sarah never got back any of the misused inheritance. If she still had it, Sarah could have lived comfortably in her old age. But now, she lives in poverty and loneliness. On the other hand, even though Catherine used the inheritance to pay off her debts, her spending habits didn't change, and she's accumulated even more debt. Without money to repay her debts, she keeps moving to avoid her loan sharks. Only now do I truly feel the weight of Tom's passing. Though things turned out differently from Tom's last wish, I believe I haven't done anything wrong. Tom wanted me to prioritize my happiness above all else. Living with Sarah and Catherine would have gone against Tom's wishes for our well-being. I believe he would understand. From now on, with memories of Tom in my heart, I'll take a new step forward.